Chapter 40, The First Night You Are Listening at Novel Full. Audio. Because of the visit by the teacher from the Heavenly Academy, Chen Changxing wasn't in a good mood, but as time went by, his mood gradually got better. It would be a waste of time to have his mind consumed by anger rather than doing productive activities such as reading and xiu xinging. He didn't really care about the Ivy Festival. Become famous overnight and give a slap on the face to the people who looked down on him. He was determined to return the favor one day, but Chen Changxing didn't even reach the purification stage. Even if he could, he wouldn't want to do it yet. To obtain fame and fortune isn't necessarily a bad thing. The problem is that once he accomplishes this task, his quiet life of xiu xing would be interrupted. It would be impossible for him to put all his time into xiuxing and ignore all the events from the outside like the recent days. Luo. No matter what Chen Changxing does, she would always support him. Although she was a little unhappy about him shopping without her, Chen Changxing would just use a single puzzle to make her happy again, talk less of the serious events. And to become famous through the Ivy Festival, she wouldn't even think about such a thing regarding her own background. This was the attitude that Chen Changxing and Lulu held toward the Ivy League. They really don't care about it. It was fine even if they were forgotten by the people. Following the past experience, it would be normal for the Tradition Academy to be forgotten. But the difference this year was the existence of Officer Xian. After the reminder from the bishop, Officer Xian tried to silently realize the purpose of the Pope. Although he has yet to realize anything and didn't see any change occurring in the capital due to the appearance of the new student of the Tradition Academy, the reminder was enough for him to not forget about that new student. One day in the early summer, a carriage rode into the 100 Blossom Street and arrived at the Traditional Academy. It was around sunset and the rose-red sky was above the carriage when it rode out of the Tradition Academy. The carriage rode out of the 100 Blossom Street, followed the streets of the capital, arrived at the Heavenly Academy, and stopped at the stone door. Luo raised a corner of the curtain in the carriage and glanced at the sidewalk. She looked at the buildings and taverns. Her eyes opened widely and was filled with curiosity. She had been to the Heavenly Academy many times before, but she was with her servants and the guards from the royal palace. She always entered from the back door of the Heavenly Academy silently. Besides interacting with the professors and the elite students, she never spoke with anyone else in the school. It was her first time entering the front entrance of the Heavenly Academy. Chen Changxing has been to the Heavenly Academy 2 times before. The first time he came for its entrance exam and that experience wasn't great. The second time he came all wet and embarrassed, not exactly a great experience either. He has already lost his respect for this school, but he admits that the environment here are truly beautiful. The trees are lined up in groups and the brooks curved whichever way it desired. The summer flower blossomed beautifully. Sitting in the carriage watching these pretty sights helped Chen Changxing clear his mind off of the Ivy Festival, off of all the interaction with strangers, and off of the whole night waste of xiu xing thinking that he would encounter Tang 36 soon. His mood got even better. Officer Xian didn't know his personality, so as he saw him staring silently outside of the window, he thought Chen Changxing felt melancholic and misinterpreted his thoughts. Xian was a little worried and patted on his shoulder and comforted, "You just need to sit there. It's fine if you don't present." Chen Changxing turned around and nodded to show he understood and thanked him sincerely. Officer Xian was silent for a moment and said, "Don't worry too much about the words that teacher said in the Tradition Academy. I do recommend you two to not enter the field and join the competition. This year's Ivy Festival is different from previous years. You should really be careful." Chen Changxing knew he was showing his kindness. "Don't worry, I have already prepared myself to sit for one night." "Yes. One night." Officer Xian relaxed a little because he knew his kindness wasn't misinterpreted, but suddenly he found the problem in Chen Changxing's sentence and asked confusingly, "You don't know?" Chen Changxing was confused as well. "Know what?" Officer Xian looked at Luo who stopped glancing out of the window. Luo was confused as well. "What should we know?" Ivy Festival is a private event set by the academies. But it is actually the practice test of the Great Trial, and its rules are exactly the same as that of the Great Trial. Since the Great Trial spanned over the duration of 3 days, then the Ivy Festival would also last for 3 nights. You guys really don't know. Then you probably don't know that these 3 nights are not consecutive either. Officer Xin stared at the two as if he was looking at monsters. What are you guys preparing to do coming here? Chen Chongqing didn't pay any attention to this question because all of his mind was focusing on the last part of the information. He felt a little irritated. It was not only 1 night but 3 nights. Then how much time would he be wasting? How many books would he lose the opportunity to read? Is this suitable? Luo saw Chen Chongqing spacing out and said to Officer Xin, "Don't worry, we are prepared. We didn't even eat our lunch yet. We would definitely eat a lot today." Officer Xin was speechless. He didn't know what type of weird combination these two were. He looked at Chen Chongqing and advised again, "Anyhow, be careful tonight. Although I'm not exactly sure, I've heard some rumors. There may be some unexpected guests joining the Ivy Festival as well, but it may not happen either." Just this moment, the carriage has arrived at the main court of tonight's Ivy Festival. Officer Xin said, "I still have some business to take care of, therefore I could only accompany you guys here." Chen Chongqing and Luo thanked him and got off the carriage. The night has arrived and the previously green forest has now turned into a dark shadow. They were stunned and felt a mysterious pressure from the school oppressing them. "This way please." A Heavenly Academy student wearing black uniform was giving them direction with good manner. At the end of the stone path was a large building. There were several hundred red lamps hanging outside of the building and emitted light all over the surroundings. No wonder it was the most famous school in the entire continent. This building may be ordinary in the Heavenly Academy, but it could hold hundreds and thousands of guests inside. Looking at the densely designed red lamps, Chen Chongqing didn't feel any better, but instead he felt the pressure becoming more and more realistic. There were several hundred of young students already sitting around the hardwood tables in the building. These were the people who successfully passed the semi-trial earlier. They came from places all around the world, and not every one of them were citizens of the Zhou dynasty. All of them weren't the students of the 6 Ivies. The students of the 6 Ivies could compete in the Great Trial automatically and have permission to not enter the semi-trial. It was as if the students of the 6 Ivies were naturally superior to these young students. It is not a wonder they were a little nervous as they were sitting in the Heavenly Academy. There were other large spaces besides these hundreds of tables. Using wooden separators, several individual spaces were created. These were for the announcers, noble guests, and the students of the 6 Ivies. Although on the surface the Ivy Festival was created by the capital school as a ceremony to welcome the students who passed the semi-trial, in fact it was a field created by the 6 Ivies to present their power and influence. Every year after the Ivy Festival, there were students who passed the semi-trial transferring into the 6 Ivies. Due to this reason, the students of the 6 Ivies acted very differently than the students who weren't part of the 6 Ivies. Their expressions weren't nervous or worried, but rather prideful, cold, and expressionless. Their eyes were judging the students that were the same age as them. The best spot this year belonged to the Heavenly Academy. The expressions of these young people wearing the dark uniform didn't express pride intentionally, but for sure they were prideful. In the area next to the Heavenly Academy sat the students of the Starseeker Academy. Their expression were calm like a lake and their gesture were still like a mountain. Right beside them were 3 other schools. Academy of Priest, Academy of Li Palace, and 13 divisions of Green Light. The Heavenly Academy needs no explanation. Its history goes way back in time and it was known as the best school in the continent. The present Pope and the previous Virgin of the Southern sect all graduated from the Heavenly Academy. The tradition didn't have a center palace or temple, therefore the Pope discussed his business in the Li Palace. For sure the Academy of Li Palace was powerful as well. The Academy of Priest holds all royal ceremonies and educate the priests working in the tradition. It was no ordinary school. The Starseeker Academy was the garden of the Zhou military. It contributed the most in the war between humans and demons. Its status was unique. The 13 divisions of green light was also a special place. This school focuses on Xinging the 13 scrolls of green light and mainly accepted female students. It had a close relationship with the Mountain Virgin in the south and exchanges students constantly. When Su Yurong first started out Xing, she was in this school. These were the world-famous Ivy League. The green ivies growing in front of the Li Palace was the most famous sight in the entire capital. On the stone walls of the previously mentioned schools there were also densely populated green ivies. It was the proof of history. For countless years all of the powerful Xiongyists, besides the ones from the southern sects, had the background of coming from the Ivy League. The Ivy's academies occupying the best locations in the Ivy League was natural. No matter how one looks at it, this was an obvious thing. People have already used to it and the nervous ordinary students knew this from their seniors and weren't surprised. But there was one detail that was changed in tonight's Ivy Festival that was different from the previous years. Some people have noticed that change. Besides the best spot occupied by the Ivies, in an unnoticeable corner, another area was separated by the wooden fence. That area was tiny and contained only one small table. But that spot was on the same line as the Ivy Academies. Spot was a very important thing. This was a tradition. More and more people were glancing over to that area. Some people remembered, before being called the Ivy League, the Ivy Academies were always been mentioned by the people as the 6 Ivies. The 6 Ivies obviously contained 6 schools. Adding all of the schools such as Heavenly Academy and the Starseeker Academy up, there were only 5 of them. What was the name of the last one? Chapter 41, Zhuanghuanyu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Someone remembered that among the 6 Ivies, there was one named the Tradition Academy. It seemed like it was not too far away, like it was used to be very famous, like there wasn't any news about this school for so long, like there weren't even seats reserved for this school in the Ivy Festival for the past few years, like it had never existed. A school that had been abandoned for many years, that was almost forgotten by the world. But surprisingly, it still had the right to be considered one of the 6 Ivies and earned a spot in the Ivy Festival this year. Why? Maybe because of the rumor that this year, the Tradition Academy finally got a new student. Yes, the reason was this simple. This year, the Tradition Academy had students and therefore it had the right to participate in the Ivy Festival. The Zhou dynasty had always respected tradition, and the Ivy Festival was a tradition. Even though the teacher from the Heavenly Academy, who was responsible for holding the Ivy Festival, wanted to eliminate the entire Tradition Academy and burn it into ashes so that he could remove it from this point in history, he still didn't have the right to reject the Tradition Academy from participating in the Ivy Festival, even if there were only 2 students in the Tradition Academy. Fabric was flying in air as the wind blew. Chen Changsheng and Luo Luo walked into the building. They followed the Heavenly Academy students' direction and walked towards the furthest front area. Inside the building, people were making comments. Several hundred of young students who were dispersed among the seats did not know them, and the people in the regions that were separated by wooden fence also didn't know them. Looking at the direction they were walking, people guessed that this couple were students from the Tradition Academy. Everyone's eyes fell on them. The people were somewhat surprised, but more so, they were curious. Based on the rumor, the freshman in the Tradition Academy was a young man, so most people were looking at Qin Changsheng. But other people took notice of Luo Luo, who was following Qin Changsheng. They noticed that this little girl was extremely beautiful, like a colored glaze. Suddenly, their eyes all lit up. On the seat for the Heavenly Academy, there was a young man. He looked handsome and cold. Although he was sitting in the Ivy Festival, his attention was not on it, as if he did not care about the upcoming competition. He did not intentionally reveal his arrogance, he was just naturally arrogant. Around a dozen of excellent Heavenly Academy students who were ready to participate in the great trial next year sat casually around this young man, but it was obvious that they viewed him as the centerpiece, like an image of 1,000 stars surrounding the sun. The fact that these supposedly self-confident Heavenly Academy students showed such an attitude towards this young man further emphasized his prominence. The young man was thinking about the thing the principal told him yesterday: if the sect of longevity actually sent people here, how should he, the representative of the Heavenly Academy, respond? This year, the Ivy Festival was held by the Heavenly Academy. He could not allow the people from the south to rob Zhou's glory. Suddenly, he saw Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo. His eyes slightly lit up, and his feeling changed slightly. The students who were sitting around him remained silent, but they were actually paying attention to him the whole time. They saw his feeling change slightly and they found themselves helplessly surprised. Although many students in the building were attracted to Luo Luo upon seeing her, the Heavenly Academy students could not accept that such thing would happen to their senior. Yes, this young student from the Heavenly Academy was Zhuang Huanyu, ranked 10th in the honor roll of Green Cloud. How could such a person be influenced emotionally by a little girl's beauty? Who was this girl? People from the Heavenly Academy looked towards Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo and suddenly remembered something. They whispered to each other, "Isn't she the junior apprentice? Why is she here?" The Heavenly Academy had a really long history. In the school, there were countless ancient legends, there were many excellent youngsters living and learning together, and therefore, there were also countless romantic stories inside the school. Among the schools, there was one that just started 2 years ago. In the story, in the forest of the Heavenly Academy's backyard, there was an extremely beautiful spirit who would occasionally appear in front of people. The spirit looked like a little cute girl, but only the most honest person could see her. The story was obviously not true, but it was based on reality. The pretty little spirit was Luo Luo, who would occasionally follow her clansmen to study in the Heavenly Academy. Zhuang Huanyu had a special status in the Heavenly Academy, so he obviously didn't believe in this story until one day when Professor was teaching him and his several juniors privately. He saw a little girl sitting by the window. The sun shined on her face and she was as pretty as a colored glaze. He was very devoted to Xiu Xing and had never cared about any romantic things between boys and girls. He was always on the top in the school and the lovely looks of the female students didn't distract him in the slightest. But in that moment, he could not glance away. Later on, he met her several times during the professor's lectures. His professor was the principal of the Heavenly Academy. Zhuang Huanyu heard the little girl discuss her problems regarding Xiu Xing with the professor. He was amazed to learn that the girl could follow the professor's thinking. Later on, he found out that this little girl's guardians were all elites, which indicated that she had an uncommon identity. He felt tempted. He thought this girl was worth for him to like. However, after that day, he never saw her again. She never appeared again. He never told this to anyone, but because of her sudden disappearance, he remained silent for a long time. He was thinking, was it true that something that he could never get was the best? Or, does missing something give people such a deep memory? Otherwise, why would he remember her so often? He hoped she would appear in front of him again. For that, he would even discard his own arrogance. He would speak the first word. At this moment, he thought heaven actually heard the voice in his mind. In the Ivy Festival, she actually appeared. Moreover, in front of so many people, she was walking towards him. Zhuang Huanyu tidied up his clothes, stood up, and looked quietly at Luo Luo, who was getting closer and closer to him. The Heavenly Academy students who sat around him did not understand why their senior would stand up. Besides the people who saw Luo Luo before and knew what was happening, the others all thought he was representing the Heavenly Academy to welcome this couple. They were surprised, thinking to themselves, since when senior cared about such secular thing. Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo walked to the front of the seats for the Heavenly Academy. They were ready to follow the previous Heavenly Academy students' direction to the region in the corner, but unexpectedly, among the seats for the Heavenly Academy, approximately a dozen of people suddenly stood up. This made Chen Chongsheng not know what to do, so he instinctively paused his steps. Zhuang Huanyu's lips slowly raised up. He was about to smile and say something. He was going to say long time no see to Luo Luo. A moment later, his smile disappeared before it even came up. His look became cold as it used to be, or even colder. Because Luo Luo did not see him. Luo Luo was looking at Chen Chongsheng. Since the night she entered the Tradition Academy through the wall, as long as there was Chen Chongsheng, her eyes were either on the books, or on Chen Chongsheng's body, every moment, and this moment was no exception. She looked at Chen Chongsheng with eyes full of admiration. Admiration and liking were very similar, people could easily perceive them wrongly. Zhuang Huanyu was not sure if he perceived it right, but he felt much worse. I only saw you, yet you only see someone else. This was the thing that could cause the most anger in the world. After he saw that Luo Luo's hand was actually holding onto Chen Chongsheng's sleeves, his anger reached the max. Zhuang Huanyu did not do anything. He was the genius who ranked 10th in the honor roll of Green Cloud, the senior of the Heavenly Academy. He represented a lot and had to be responsible for a lot. Therefore he could not be angered easily, he could not lose his temper for such a thing. He looked at Chen Chongsheng and saluted calmly. The height his arm was raised to, the distance between his wrist and sleeve, were both so perfect. Yet his look was too calm, too cold. Chen Chongsheng was a little surprised. He calmly returned a salute. The height his arm raised to, the distance between his wrist and sleeve, were both so perfect. His look appeared to be somewhat confused, somewhat puzzled. The surrounding became very quiet. Zhuang Huanyu loosened his hands. Chen Chongsheng walked forward. From somewhere, a sound came up. It sounded like someone was holding a breath for a long time and eventually had to release it. Both performed the most formal courtesy, but in people's eyes, Zhuang Huanyu was perfect, and Chen Chongsheng was dull. The difference was seen immediately. Actually, that's only because he was Zhuang Huanyu and Chen Chongsheng was someone unknown. Zhuang Huanyu looked towards Luo Luo and said, "Junior, long time no see." He said it very casually, but he was actually very serious, even more serious than he was in the first time he saw his biological father. Luo Luo opened up her eyes wide, looked at him for a while, suddenly recalled something, laughed and said, "Ah, it's you, long time no see." Little girl's laugh was very cute. But Zhuang Huanyu sensed hate in the speech. He rather she didn't remember who he was. Unlike now, when she needed to think for a while to remember who he was. Who I am. I am Zhuang Huanyu. Anyone who had seen me cannot forget who I am. How could you forget me? Why did you have to pretend like you have forgotten about me? Were you joking, or fooling with me? Inside Zhuang Huanyu's heart, there was huge waves of emotions, but he looked extremely calm. When he was about to say something, such as if it's not because of something, he almost couldn't remember the junior's appearance, Luo Luo dragged Chen Chongsheng's sleeve, left the area reserved for the Heavenly Academy and walked towards the corner. On the way, she was happily discussing something with Chen Chongsheng. She only left a view of her back to Zhuang Huanyu. Zhuang Huanyu looked at Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo's backs and remained silent. He did not notice the previous discussion in the field. He couldn't understand why the junior would leave the Heavenly Academy. When he looked towards the empty region where Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo were walking to, he realized surprisingly that they were representing the Tradition Academy. He asked, "Is that young man Chen Chongsheng?" The Heavenly Academy student who was responsible for leading them replied yes. Sure enough, he is interesting. Zhuang Huanyu stopped saying a word and returned to his seat. He still looked indifferent, but his true feeling was not so. Chapter 42, Laughter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The traditional academy was lined up next to the rest of the 5 other 6 ivies, but it was located in the corner and was extremely distant from other tables. Although the location of their table were unfavorable, Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo weren't people who care about such small and sat down causally. You know that student of Heavenly Academy from before? Chen Chongsheng asked. Luo Luo thought about it and replied, I saw him a few times when I came to the Heavenly Academy. Chen Chongsheng thought back to the crowd that surrounded him earlier, he seems to be famous. Luo Luo didn't use much time to think this time, Zhuang Huanyu, many people call him Sir Huanyu. Chen Chongsheng remembered that he saw this name on the stone walls of the Academy of Priests. He remembered that it appeared on one of the top rankings seen on the green cloud of honor roll. But he didn't think Luo Luo could recall his name without much thought and said curiously, I never expected that you would know his name. Luo Luo replied, Master, you said earlier as well, he is very famous. Chen Chongsheng said, for your personality, you wouldn't know the most famous people. Luo Luo stuck out her tongue embarrassingly and said, it's hard to not notice his name because we were close to each other. Chen Chongsheng didn't understand her words entirely. He thought she was talking about the time when she was studying in the Heavenly Academy. He glanced at the tables of the Heavenly Academy while he glanced toward the sittings of the Heavenly Academy and made sure he didn't miss anyone, then said confusingly, that guys actually didn't attend. Luo Luo knew who he was talking about and asked curiously, Master, you really know Tang 36? Chen Chongsheng said, although I don't even know how I befriended him. But, yes I do. When they were talking, the preparation of the Ivy Festival was completed and the tables were filled. All of the students and teachers of the 6 Ivies were present and the last 2 people who walked in were characters representing the government and the tradition. The bishop of the tradition, Mei Li Sha, and Dong Yu General, Su Shi Ji. As the 2 great characters walked into the festival, all of the professors and students stood up to bow like a wave. Bishop Mei Li Sha held power in the Department of Education for many years and has great influence in the academies of the capital, but most importantly he was a trusted subordinate of the Pope. Although East Guard General Su Shi Ji wasn't as high in power as the bishop, his military contribution couldn't be ignored. In addition, he was well trusted by the Divine Queen and the entire continent knew he has a great daughter. The Ivy Festival was a festival for all the young geniuses of the Zhou dynasty. Everyone sitting here was no doubt talented. But looking up toward the young girl of age 14 sitting upon the mountain virgin. Raising their heads to glance at the seemingly indestructible title curved onto the green cloud honor roll, who dare call themselves geniuses. Chen Chongsheng looked at Su Shi Ji who sat on top. His expression was calm and seemed to had never heard of this name before. Only Luo Luo noticed that his breath was a little more rapid than usual. Although it was still smooth, it was still a little faster than normal. After living with him for many days, she knew that this meant that his mood was disturbed. This was the first time Chen Chongsheng saw Chen Shi Ji. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons he was willing to attend the Ivy Festival was that Officer Xin told him that Su Shi Ji would attend it as well. He wanted to see what his almost father-in-law and the man who almost ended his future looked like. Su Shi Ji seemed like a regular middle-aged man, but of course he was not ordinary. When Chen Chongsheng looked at him from a distance, he felt a cold and harsh presence and he could see a faint bloody smile. Chen Chongsheng's straight eyebrows were raised slightly and he touched his nose tip, it wasn't a pleasant smell. He then recalled Madame Su, who he saw back in the general's mansion. He thought back to the insults and obstacles he faced after he arrived to the capital. His eyebrows were raised higher and he continued to touch his nose tip. At the same time, he started to breathe heavier and heavier. The daughter of this couple was the reincarnation of the true phoenix. No wonder people say the world is not fair. Luo Luo was paying attention to his reaction since the beginning. She knew that his mood was getting worse, but after all she still couldn't hold her curiosity and asked carefully, Master, it seems like the relationship between you and Su Yurong truly isn't good. Why? Chen Chongsheng was dazed a little. I thought you can hold it and won't ask. Luo Luo grabbed to his sleeve and shook it as if she were a spoiled girl. I'm really curious. Chen Chongsheng said helplessly, I already promised someone that won't tell it to anyone. They obviously wouldn't think of how close they look as they were whispering to each other, and of course they wouldn't think that everything they did was seen by Zhuang Huanyu. Zhuang Huanyu's emotion was still as calm as usual. There was someone else who also saw Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo chatting closely, but his emotion wasn't so calm. The teacher from the Heavenly Academy looked away from the corner. His face looked extremely cold, but strangely, he did not scold Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo. He also didn't point it out to the public to release all of his resentment he had toward the Tradition Academy. Instead, he continued to calmly advance the festival onto the next stage. The Ivy Festival used the same format of the Great Trial. There were 3 rounds. One round tested on knowledge, one tested on battle skill, and one tested on their fighting capability. The order of the tests is randomly chosen, but there were obviously many more rules. Now the rules were told one by the teacher from the Heavenly Academy. The students sitting at the end of the banquet under the fabric, paid attention to it closely. They were not like the students from the 6 Ivies, who had teachers and seniors explain process and rules of the Great Trial to them detailedly. The Ivy Festival today was like a pretest that the government gave them. Obviously they had to be attentive. Chen Chongsheng also listened attentively to not miss a single word. Although the Tradition Academy was one of the 6 Ivies, he doesn't have teachers. He had to do everything by himself. He came to participate in the Ivy Festival today. Besides, he wanted to see Su Yurong's dad. Acquiring the information about the Great Trial was the most important reason. The Ivy Festival was called a festival, but it's actually the preliminary test to the Great Trial, or a wind vane. Besides the geniuses from the southern sects, the final rank in the Ivy Festival was basically equivalent to the rank in the Great Trial. Even if there were changes, the changes wouldn't be too large. Xiu Xing to a large extent, was based on time. From the Ivy Festival to the Great Trial, there was only half of a year. How could one have enormous change in such period of time? On the Ivy Festival this year, Chen Chongsheng had not purified successfully yet. He's still a commoner who doesn't Xiu Xing, but he's thinking of getting the first place in the Great Trial in the beginning of the next year. It is not a wonder that Tang 36 would think he was an idiot, or that Chen Chongsheng himself is an idiot. Besides Luo Luo, who would believe in him? In the Ivy Festival, although students who participated in the pretest occasionally would give huge surprise to the human world, but most of the time, it's still the students from the big schools played the main role. On the Ivy Festival in the recent 10 years, in the end, it always turned out to be competition between the 6 Ivies. The Ivy Festival would be held for 3 days. Tonight was the first night, and it happened to be the actual fight. It can be anticipated that the festival definitely would be very boisterous. The spectators, including Su Shiji and other officials, were also guessing if the Heavenly Academy, as the host this year, would keep their reserved manner or not, and let Zhuang Huanyu come on stage. Zhuang Huanyu was ranked 10th on the honor roll of Green Cloud, which seemed very outstanding, but considering that the Heavenly Academy was claimed to be the strongest school in the continent and that he is the representative of the Heavenly Academy, his strength wasn't as good as people expected. Even though it's impossible for him to surpass Su Yurong, who had the rarest bloodline, his rank was still too low. Only the high officials like Zhu Shiji knew that the only reason why Zhuang Huanyu was ranked 10th on the honor roll of Green Cloud was because he had never challenged anyone who ranked above him after he fought one of the 7 rulings 2 years ago and got placed in 10th place. This doesn't mean that he's conservative and coward, but because 2 years ago he was already 15. At that time Qiu Shanjun already left the honor roll of Green Cloud and began to march on to the first place of the honor roll of Golden Miracle. He thought that at such situation, the honor roll of Green Cloud was already meaningless to him. So tonight, will Zhuang Huanyu come on stage? The students who were sitting on the end of the banquet are allowed to participate voluntarily in the fight tonight. Although they know they can hardly defeat the students from the 6 Ivies who had teachings from famous professors, thinking that there were rarely any bloody incidents happened in the Ivy Festival before and it was an extremely rare opportunity to improve, they were actively signing up. Later on, the other schools of the 6 Ivies also sent their roster for students who were participating in the fight. Besides the professor from the Heavenly Academy and the other 2 high-status people, no one knew who actually signed up. Finally, only the Tradition Academy was left. Chen Chongsheng got the confirmation from the officer Xian, and he listened clearly when the professor from the Heavenly Academy was speaking, knew that he and Luo Luo fulfilled the requirement to participate in the Ivy Festival, so they could come in here, but that doesn't mean they have to go down to join the fight. After all, the Ivy Festival wasn't the great trial. With Chen Chongsheng's current Xiu Xing, if he went down that he definitely wouldn't have a good ending, therefore of course he wouldn't go down. This was planned to not go but there were people trying to force him to go down, forcing him to be humiliated. The professor from the Heavenly Academy looked at the corner and said expressionlessly, "Where's the roster from the Tradition Academy?" According to the tradition of the Ivy Festival, if one doesn't sign up, that means one knows he can't beat others and surrender. It's just another way of saving one's reputation. No one had actually pointed this thing out because it implicates one school's honor. If they really embarrassed the other, who knows what kind of result can happen. Tonight, the professor from the Heavenly Academy did so. He didn't care about the reputation of the Tradition Academy and of course he wouldn't care about the result. There were only 2 little children in the Tradition Academy. After being humiliated, were they actually going to suddenly have a huge power-up and do something? That's a joke. The words of the professor of the Heavenly Academy were echoing in the building. A complete silence. After a while, maybe because they saw the poor seats for the Tradition Academy in the lonely couple, maybe because they remembered the Tradition Academy's declining reality in tragic history, also the Divine Queen and the Pope's attitude to this school. A bunch of laughs could be heard in the building. There were helpless laughs, but also contemptuous laughs. Some laughs were unintentional and some were intentional. But they were all harsh. Chapter 43, The Little Monster of the Academy of Priest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. All of the officials and professors attending the Ivy Festival knew why this professor of Heavenly Academy contained such hatred toward the Traditional Academy, which was already in ruin. Even if the Tradition Academy only has 2 or 3 ants left, he wouldn't let go of them and wanted to squash them into dusts. They were all long-time citizens of the capital and they were familiar with the government's rules. If it weren't for that pair of students, the Tradition Academy would be forgotten and destroyed next year. But not everyone thought this change was so simple. Officer Xian, who told Chen Chongsheng he had some business to take care of, was now standing behind the Bishop of Department of Education, Mei Li Sha. He lowered his voice and said, "It seems that someone wants to force Chen Chongsheng to join the competition." The face of Bishop always contained a trace of sleepiness. It seemed that he could never get enough rest. After hearing this, he struggled and opened his eyes and said casually, "Is that child this idiotic?" Officer Xian was troubled. "He is not an idiot, but rather a young man. I'm just afraid that he would be aggravated by the crowd." The bishop glanced at the Tradition Academy's position through the curtain and was surprised to see the angry young girl sitting next to Chen Chongsheng. The girl may appear small through the crack of a door, but she couldn't appear tiny through the crack of eyelids, because the bishop knew that young girl. He signed, "Then let us pray for that professor." The professor of the Heavenly Academy stared expressionlessly at Chen Chongsheng who was sitting at the corner. He didn't purposely try to give off an oppressive and cold aura. Rather he just looked at him as if he was a small insect waiting to be frozen to death. Chen Chongsheng never thought of the next step. If he participate in the written competition and Luo Luo attend the fighting arena, then they will still have a chance. But he knew clearly that if someone was trying to put down the Tradition Academy on purpose, then nothing would go with his plan. His goal was the Ling Yen Pavilion. He needs to participate in the great trial and obtain the first place. Before this happened, he hoped that nothing would disturb his plan to succeed. If he actually enter the competition tonight, no matter victory or defeat, it wouldn't be a good choice for his plan. Since he wouldn't enter the competition, then why should he stay in the building and endure these mocking laughters? Why should he try to act calm under the cold stares from the professor of the Heavenly Academy? Therefore he made a decision that no one expected. Let's leave. He told Luo Luo, who was sitting next to him, and stood up to leave. The mocking laughters in the building suddenly stopped. Everyone saw his action, but they didn't understand. Facing the mocking, scoffing, and laughter, Chen Qingxing ignored these negative attitude. It may be viewed as cowardice, but couldn't it also be treated as unimaginable bravery? Luo Luo never spoke against his decisions. She stood up without hesitation and was ready to walk out with him. Looking at those people who mocked them before but were now surprised, Luo Luo shut her lips and thought to herself. My master is definitely no ordinary person. His endurance is excellent and was able to withstand all of the unbearables. She should learn from him and not think about ripping all of these people into pieces just because they mocked him. The world is beautiful, so why should she be so irritated? As they were walking out, someone spoke from outside of the building. What do you guys think the Ivy Festival is? You can enter whenever you want and leave whenever you want. The speaker of this sentence was young, but his voice contained pride and coldness. It even sounded crazy and hid violence inside. It seemed that the speaker would kill anyone for the tiniest reason. Chen Qingxing didn't like this sort of character. He stopped and looked toward the entrance. Several hundred people in the Ivy Festival all turned around and looked at the entrance. A youngster was standing there. His face was pale, his eyes were merciless, and his lips were crimson. His age seemed to be around 12 or 13 years old, but he appeared to drown in liquor and sex for many years. Especially his complexion, it gave off a ruthless feeling and sent shivers down people's spines. Many people have yet to know this youngster. But many people from the Heavenly Academy and the Starseeker Academy were familiar with him. They knew who this youngster was, and therefore no one said he was late. There was only silence, and Zhuang Huanyu wrinkled his eyebrows slightly. He wasn't particularly happy with it. The expression of the professor of the Heavenly Academy was calm. It was obvious that he knew this youngster would appear from the beginning. He looked at Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo. They thought if they decided to endure the embarrassment and not enter the competition, they could save the last breath of the Tradition Academy. Due to his background and some complex reasons, he couldn't personally fight against the pair of students of the Tradition Academy. Also, he couldn't let the students of the Heavenly Academy help him. But he had already chose the best person from the schools of the capital. No matter background or strength, this little monster from the academies of priests was the best choice to send Tradition Academy to its way of demise, and there wouldn't be any problem afterwards. The professor of the Heavenly Academy took a peek at the spot of the bishop. Many people in the capital knew that there was a little monster in the Academy of Priests. That little monster was strong. Due to his young age, he didn't enter the honor roll of Green Cloud yet, but everyone knew that he has the strength to enter the top 50 in the honor roll. It was rumored that this little monster was the apprentice of the Pope, but he never admitted to this rumor. Also, in another rumor, this little monster killed many Xiaxingists in the meditation stage, and including another young genius on the honor roll of Green Cloud when he was only 10 years old. Of course, he didn't admit to this rumor either. The little monster didn't attend school at the Heavenly Academy like the Pope did when he was young. He also didn't follow the Pope and study at the Academy of Li Palace. Instead, he went to the school with the strictest rules and harshest Xiao Xing techniques. The reason for this is that he didn't want to follow the same road as the Pope. But the strict rules of the Academy of Priests didn't stop the murders of the little monster. But the harsh Xiao Xing did make him stronger and stronger. Not many people dare to challenge him in the capital. Even the powerful Xiao Xingists would take a step back when facing him. Perhaps it was due to the rumor, the student of the Pope is always unique, but most importantly it wasn't due to this rumor, but rather a fact that was known by everyone. the name of this little monster of the Academy of Priests was Tian Ji. He is one of the family of Tian Ji. The Divine Queen's last name is Tian Ji. The little monster of the Academy of Priests was her nephew. Under the view of countless eyes, Tian Ji walked into the building and he was arrogant. His pale and unhealthy face was full of indifference and mockery. It was the indifference toward life and the mockery toward everyone. He was reached 12 years of age this age. He was really not a youngster but rather a boy. But he has already killed many people and saw many things. His powerful background and strength twisted his view of the world. He was truly a monster. Chen Changsheng looked at the boy who was a head shorter than him walking toward him. He sensed that the bloody smell got stronger and stronger, and he disliked Tian Ji more and more. But Tian Ji didn't even look at him for a moment. He glanced over the young students on the scattered tables, but in fact nothing entered his eyes. He mocked coldly, a bunch of idiots thinking they would benefit from attending this festival. Still characters who would be mocked in the end. The young students sitting on the scattered tables all endured many difficulties and passed the semi-trial of the great trial, and at last obtained the permission to attend the Ivy Festival. Although they knew they were just background of the students of the 6 Ivies, they still had hope in their heart. But this moment they heard the ruthless words from this young boy, they started to get angry. Tian Ji rolled his eyeballs and his voice spilled out from his teeth like a sharp blade, "You guys want to die." The information of the background and strength of this boy was passed around in the scattered table. Although the young students were angry, no one dared to stand up. Talk less if they could actually win against this young boy, but even if they could, do they dare touch him? Enough. The principal of the Academy of Priests wrinkled his eyebrows slightly and spoke. Tian Ji scoffed coldly. Although he didn't speak further, but the unhappy expression on his face showed that he didn't really respect his own teacher. But the weird things is, logically speaking, the professor of the Heavenly Academy didn't want to restrain this little monster for some reason, but there were many truly powerful figures in the field. For example, the bishop of the Department of Education, or Dongyu General Ze Tian Ji. They have enough strength and influence to keep Tian Ji in check. But they all kept silent. Perhaps they were just trying to figure out the actual reason for the appearance of this little monster. If this monster entered the competition, then blood would definitely be spilled on this field. Surely the Academy of Priests didn't want him to attend the Ivy Festival. Was this the command from the Li Palace or the Royal Palace? Or the reason for this little monster to attend the Ivy Festival was actually for the Tradition Academy? Apparently not. The already ruined Tradition Academy couldn't attract the eyes of this little monster. He glanced at the direction of the Heavenly Academy and didn't see the person he wanted to see, therefore he was disappointed and irritated. He screamed loudly, "Where is Tang 36? Didn't that rural idiot wanted to handicap me? Where is he? Is he scared now?" Besides those powerful figures, there were still some people who could care less of Tian Ji's background and strength. Zhuang Huanyu looked at him expressionlessly and said, "If you continue to interrupt, then I wouldn't mind to be the first one to challenge you." As the student representation of the Heavenly Academy and the young genius placed on the 10th place of the honor roll of Green Cloud. His quiet words was more powerful than the angry of the students from the scattered tables. Tian Ji laughed weirdly and stuck his red tongue to lick his lips. "You can't bully a child." This sentence may seem inappropriate, but it showed that this arrogant boy was actually very calm and was afraid of Zhuang Huanyu. Yet at this moment, a laugh came up from a direction. Obviously he was laughing at how this little monster only dared to bully people who were weaker than him and afraid of challenging stronger elites, such a coward. Tian Ji suddenly stopped laughing, looked at where the laugh came from. Many people follow him looked toward where the laugh was from. When both the bishop and Ze Tian Ji were remaining silent, and the Heavenly Academy professor was intentionally indulging him. Besides famous young elites like Zhuang Huanyu dared, who else dared to laugh at this little monster? Was that person really not afraid of death? The laugh came from the seats for the Star Seeker Academy. That's a very stalwart young man. Chen Changxing knew that young man. He knew him when he was taking the entrance exam to the Star Seeker Academy. He was worrying about this young man. Because Tian Hai's eyes suddenly became very cold, no longer brutal, looking at that stalwart young man, as if he's looking at a dead person. At this moment, the official who was leading the Star Seeker Academy, asked expressionlessly, why couldn't he laugh? Even the little monster like Tian Hai knew that the Star Seeker Academy could not be easily disturbed, especially when he did not have the proper reason. He looked at that big and tall youngster, laughed, revealing his white teeth, like a Joey who was extremely calm before he went crazy. The curtain behind the building was slowly opened. Under the thousands of stars, there was a very big stone-made platform. At its surrounding there were around 10 copper furnaces, burning and releasing fragrances that can calm people's mind. Under the copper furnaces, deep into the underground, there buried defensive magical weapons, which were maintained by teachers from the Heavenly Academy, making sure that the qi during fight wouldn't influence people outside the platform. The Ivy Festival officially began. Chen Changsheng and Luo did not leave, because Luo slightly grabbed his sleeve, also because he was somewhat worried about the young man from the Star Seeker Academy, also because the little monster from the Priest Academy mentioned his friend Tang 36. According to the convention in the Ivy festivals in previous years, in the beginning, there would be educational fights between students from various regions and students from the 6 Ivies. The gap between the two sides was too big, which actually made it easy to control, so normally there wouldn't be any accident. However, there were so many surprising incidents happened in the Ivy Festival this year. The Tradition Academy actually appeared again in the public, the Priest Academy actually let the little bloodthirsty monster out, faintly, there was a dangerous wave flowing underground, obviously there would be more accidents occurring later. Before the professor from the Heavenly Academy even announced the fighting roster, a person already appeared on the stage. Tian Hai looked at the direction of the Star Seeker Academy and laughed. Before, someone asked, why couldn't he laugh? Of course he could, the boring Ivy Festival was a funny thing originally, everyone can laugh, you see, I am laughing too. He's only a little boy, laughed naively, but his face was very pale, his lip was bloodily red, which made him look very violent. Yet now I am preparing to kill you. Tian Hai looked at that stalwart youngster as if he was looking at a dead man, asked seriously, now, can you still laugh as happily as before? The entire building was completely silent, in the seats for the Star Seeker Academy, there wasn't any sound too. Zhuang Huanyu slightly stirred his eyebrow, you know the rule for the Ivy Festival, if you don't follow the rule, then I have to represent the Heavenly Academy and beat you. I can't beat you, so I don't dare to offend you, but if someone dares to offend me, then what should I do? Tian Hai looked at him, then turned his eyes to the professor from the Heavenly Academy, asked, I won't kill him, is that enough? The professor said expressionlessly, the Ivy Festival is mainly about communication, don't go overboard. Tian Hai looked back to where the Star Seeker Academy was. The stalwart youngster remained silent for a while, shook his head and refused his teacher's indication, slowly walked up the stage. He's the most outstanding freshman of the Star Seeker Academy this year, yet he was never arrogant, but was rather simple and honest. So all the teachers favored him, gave him high expectation, hope him can participate in the great trial next year, therefore they specifically brought him to participate in the Ivy Festival. Because he's simple and honest, therefore he's straightforward. Before when Tian Hai was arrogant and disrespected everyone in the building, he thought the teachers would say something, yet they were so quiet, so for the first time he felt disappointed toward Star Seeker Academy, so, he laughed out loud. Yes, he laughed intentionally. This big and tall young man, wanted to use this laugh to tell everyone, Star Seeker Academy was still like it used to be, did not know what's fear. From that laugh, he began to prepare for the fight later on. He knew that he could not beat the little monster from the Priest Academy, but he didn't fight him yet, so he couldn't surrender. He walked up the stone platform, facing Tian Haya Air, standing under the starlights. He seemed to become even more stalwart. My name is Xian Yuan Pe, freshman from Starseeker Academy. Tian Haya Air smiled and said, tried to say you are just a freshman first, want me to go easy on you. Look at your big and awkward looking, you are probably 20-something, I am only 12 this year, so relax, I definitely won't go easy on you. The big and tall young man called Xian Yuan Pe, said honestly, I just grow a bit faster. I am actually only 13, also I am actually just a freshman. Of course, indeed, I am older than you, so you don't have to go easy on me. Very good. Tian Haya Air stopped laughing. Xian Yuan Pe straightened his waist, became concentrated, tightened up his fist like a rock, said, please enlighten me. Part of the courtesy, Tian Haya Air was expressionless, casually gave him a punch. An extremely terrifying hurricane formed on the stage, spiraling at a high speed. His fist was the center of this hurricane. At the surrounding of the platform, suddenly appeared an intangible barrier. The barrier actually became slightly deformed, the starlights that penetrated through it became extraordinarily dismal. A complete silence. Everyone looked at Tian Haya Air's fist and felt shocked and wordless. Everyone knew, this little monster was very strong, had bloodline from the Tian Hai family, and had been taught by the Pope, how could he not be strong? But no one imagined that, he was strong to such an extent. Just a simple fist, would cause hurricane to form, would cause the barrier that was maintained by many Heavenly Academy teachers together to deform. People looked at the boy who was laughing brutally on stage, thinking that he's only 12, felt even more shocked. If he was on the honor roll of Green Cloud, what's going to be his rank? On the great trial next year, which tier would he get into? No one thought Xian Yuan Pe could defend this fist, even the teachers and students from the Starseeker Academy. Yet out of everyone's expect, Tian Haya Air's fist was blocked. As the two fists collided, a thunderous sound came up, the barrier was deformed again. Blood flowed out from Xian Yuan Pe's lip, his eyes became a little bleak, his feet stepped deeply into the hard stone floor, his clothes were already broken due to the wind blowed up by Tian Haya Air's fist. He's about to lose, yet at least he did not fall, did not move back for even one step. Because at the moment the two fists collided, something strange occurred. The youngster was originally big and tall, so his fist was extremely big, now it became even larger. More surprisingly, a very thick layer of black hair appeared on his fist, even his right arm was filled fully with long black hair. His right arm suddenly enlarged, in a second, it was bigger than a normal person's leg. Those strong muscles, like iron pillars, seemed to have infinite power inside. Only so, he could defend the horrifying fist from Tian Haya Air. Metamorphosis. He's actually Yao. Many shouted out surprisingly, especially those students sitting on the end of the banquet. To many, it's the first time in their life seeing such image, so they kept yelling shockingly. The teachers and students from the 6 Ivies were also extremely surprised. Only the Starseeker Academy's teachers who knew this fact beforehand remained wordless, but even they didn't expect this Yao freshman, under Tian Haya Air's horrifying pressure, could actually use metamorphosis to exert strength that was much stronger than his normal Xiao Xing stage. Tian Haya Air also didn't anticipate that this opponent, who he looked down on, could actually defend his fist. This made him feel a little humiliated. This made him feel very angry. He crazily screamed out, like a child whose toy got stolen. The teachers from the Priest Academy heard the scream, their face suddenly changed. The hurricane was formed again. Several lightnings faintly were shown inside. Tian Haya Air's fist continued punch forward, destroying Xian Yuan Pe's strong defense. Don't you dare to defend it again. On the stone platform, the body screamed crazily. On Xian Yuan Pe's metamorphosized arm, there were green smokes rising up, instantly blown away by hurricane. A horrifying power, along his wrist transmitted to his shoulder. He could no longer support himself, spit out blood and moved back. Tian Ji followed up like a ghost, and gave him another hit. Xian Yuanpe gritted his teeth, shouted angrily, then raised his heavily wounded right fist, defended reluctantly. Enough. Under the stage, Zhuang Huanyu shouted coldly. Almost at the same moment, teachers from both Priest Academy and Starseeker Academy stood up, shouted urgently, "Stop." Only people with enough stage could see that Xian Yuanpe already lost, but the reason why Tian Ji gave out this fist was to destroy his arm. Yao people innately had strong body, especially after metamorphosized, yet if they were heavily wounded when they were in metamorphosis, then they could hardly recover. Tian Ji was actually trying to destroy this young man's future. Ka. La. Xian Yuanpe kept spitting out blood, flew back due to Tian Ji's power, heavily fell on the stage, causing dusts on the entire ground to fly up. He stubbornly attempted to stand up again, yet he already had no power to stand up. His right arm that he formerly felt proud of, his formerly extremely strong right arm, was falling down powerlessly, it's useless now. The entire building was deadly silent. On the Ivy Festival, there rarely was any bloody incident, yet this image was so sad and brutal. The professor from the Heavenly Academy walked up, shook his head and said, "You went too harsh." Tian Ji slightly frowned, said, "I promised you I won't kill him, but I never said I won't destroy him. I heard that you Yao people were very powerful." Tian Ji looked at him, laughed contemptuously, "Just so. Xian Yuanpe looked his destroyed right arm, suddenly cried out. "He's a stalwart and brave Yao youngster, yet after all he's only 13. The entire stage was silent, although people from the Starseeker Academy were very angry, they could only remain silent. The corner for the Tradition Academy was also very silent. Luo looked at the stage. She looked at the boy's bloody right hand. Her right hand in the sleeve slightly moved. She looked at Chen Changsheng. Chen Changsheng was also looking at the stage. Chapter 44, My name is Luo. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chen Changsheng looked at the stage. On the stage was Tian Ji, who felt the stare from Chen Changsheng, looked back at Chen Changsheng. His bloody but thin lips slightly curved up forming an arc. His immature but pale face revealed a contemptuous laugh, no need to ask, the meaning of his laugh was obvious. The heavily wounded Xian Yuanpe was carried down the stone platform, the teacher from the Heavenly Academy quickly did some emergency care, then let students from the Starseeker Academy send him out of the place. Tian Ji retrieved his sight, looked at the spectators under the platform, laughed and said, "I know, you idiots all dislike me, but so what? I don't need you to like me, I only need you to afraid of me. No matter how much you hate me, what can you do? Do you really dare to do anything to me?" The Ivy Festival was truly funny, a bunch of idiots dream of fish leaping over the dragon gate, but you never think that, only the real dragons can leap over the gate in the sea of cloud. You poor people from those poor places, you really think you have that chance? Tian Ji sneered at the crowd, "I came to join the Ivy Festival, not because I want to kindly wake you idiots up. I came to do two things. After I finish those I will leave, so you guys don't have to stare at me for so long and pop your eyes out." Like what the high-status people had thought, the Priest Academy sent this crazy little monster to participate in the Ivy Festival, obviously wasn't for getting the first place. There must be hidden reasons. Probably, the incident that little monster participates in the Ivy Festival, has nothing to do with the Priest Academy at all. Now hearing Tian Ji's words, the stage became quiet. People really wanted to know, what are the two things he wanted to do? The fight he had with the Yao boy from the Starseeker Academy, was obviously an accident. It's probably not one of the two things he had to complete today. I come to participate in the Ivy Festival, because Tang 36 said he wanted to destroy me. So I came to destroy him. Tian Ji looked towards the seats for the Heavenly Academy. Although he is your student, but I think, since he could say that sentence, you can't really stop me, but interestingly, the idiot come from suburb actually doesn't dare to show up. He looked towards Chen Chongqing in the corner and said contemptuously, the second thing I have to do, is related to this useless garbage. Several days ago, besides I heard Tang 36 wanted to destroy me, I also heard a very crazy thing. The Tradition Academy. Basically the broken graveyard on the 100 Blossom Street. Actually got a freshman. Ah, that I totally can't believe in my ear. Tian Ji air, like he heard the most funny thing in the world, rubbed his stomach and laughed, his voice was extremely horrible. Suddenly, he stopped laughing, a shout echoed like thunder in the Heavenly Academy. How dare you! Tian Ji air looked coldly at Chen Chongsheng and then looked at the bishop and many people's faces. His voice was extremely deep and cold, completely unlike the sound that a 12-year-old boy could make. I don't care who did this. I just want to ask him, does he want to die? The professor from the Heavenly Academy looked at the direction of rostrum, seeing that the bishop's face was still calm. Rationally, even Tian Ji air could not criticize and even threaten these high-status people, but surprisingly, he did it, and surprisingly, the stage was still completely silent. Because he was probably representing the Pope, or possibly the Divine Queen, who wanted to ask some conservative forces in the tradition, wanted to ask those people who wished to use the Tradition Academy to cause some trouble, what do you want to do? No one could answer this question. You useless trash. You can't even purify successfully, and you still want to revitalize the Tradition Academy. What a joke. Tian Ji air looked at Chen Chongsheng and said, I know that you know Tang 36. Since he doesn't dare to show up, then you should come on stage and let me destroy you so I can finish both things at the same time. It will save me time. A complete silence. The people who had laughed before laughed towards the decline of the Tradition Academy and the silence of the couple. But now, no one laughed because of the violence Tian Ji air showed before. Because people knew, if this freshman from the Tradition Academy actually went up stage, the fate waiting for him must be worse than that Yao youngster. It probably would be death. Or. Tian Ji air looked at him, smiled and said, you can publicly announce that you quit the Tradition Academy, then kneel down to beg for my pardon. Maybe I will let you go. Chen Chongsheng wouldn't withdraw from the Tradition Academy, because this was the general's mansion. More accurately, the only choice the high-status person who hid behind the Su mansion gave him. If he doesn't have the identity as a student of the Tradition Academy, then he couldn't participate in the great trial next year. After hearing Tian Ji air's words, he was obviously very mad, but at the same time he was very confused. He didn't understand, why would the young elite from the Priest Academy be hostile to him, a suburb youngster from the Xining town? Yes, even hostility needs qualification, needed reason. This is because he didn't know that, when he was calmly shou-xing and reading in the Tradition Academy and didn't care about the wind and rain outside, didn't look at landscapes in the surrounding, in the capital there were already many things happening underground. Many people began to notice him. One such figure was the Heavenly Academy's professor, such as some people from Li Palace, such as people from the Royal Palace. The engagement between Su Yurong and him was an unknown secret. Those people obviously didn't know it's an accident that he went to study in the Tradition Academy. Those people thought, when the Tradition Academy was about to become a forgotten dust in history, suddenly there was a freshman, representing some old forces in the tradition, those who were still loyal to the Chen royal family, were doing some type of feeler, or those old forces were attempting to make some type of announcement. More importantly, those people did not see Chen Chongqing's recommendation letter, did not see the Pope's signature, so the attitude that Department of Traditional Education later put up, made them even more confirm their judgment. Such feeler or announcement was not acceptable to those people. They unhesitatingly chose to suppress it. The time they chose to do so, was the Ivy Festival. The person who was particularly responsible to this was obviously the Heavenly Academy professor who was hosting the Ivy Festival, and finally who would. There were still many officials and priests who were loyal to the Qin royal family in Zhou, so those people didn't want to make it too obvious. Therefore the little monster of the Priest Academy was the best choice, because he's Divine Queen's nephew, also he had background from the tradition. Both the Divine Queen and the Pope probably didn't know that there was a freshman in the Tradition Academy at all, but this didn't change Tian Hai's last name and succession of teaching. And the best thing was, Tian Hai was only a 12-year-old boy. Not to say humiliate or suppress, even if he killed that person on stage, so what? Little kid doesn't know much, this is always the best excuse, isn't it? Tonight the two most important spectators on the Ivy Festival, the bishop from the Department of Traditional Education and the Dongyu General Ze Tian Ji, clearly knew this inside story. Ze Tian Ji knew Qin Changsheng's origin and identity, yet because of the engagement, of course he would remain silent. No matter Qin Changsheng was destroyed or killed, both were images he wanted to see. As for the bishop's silence, it represented deeper meanings, because he knew more things. Such as the identity of the little girl sitting next to Qin Changsheng. Kneel, or not kneel, leave, or get killed. This was the multiple-choice question Tian Hai gave to Qin Changsheng. There were many choices, only to show that the Tradition Academy was already a history. After all, he was a little kid. His method was brutal and straightforward, basically was the word humiliation. No one wanted to stand such humiliation, Qin Changsheng also didn't want to. Yet what made him feel even more sad was, Luo was taking such humiliation with him. This made him feel really sorry to this little girl who obviously was living well ever since she was born and never suffered any humiliation before. Luo was indeed very mad. She had never suffered such humiliation in her life before, but Qin Changsheng remained silent for the whole time, so she could not say anything. In order to not let others see the anger gradually formed between her eyebrows, she looked down deeply. At this moment, she heard Qin Changsheng's apologizing voice. I said, become a student of the Tradition Academy, you will probably have to stand lots of humiliations and suppressions. Luo felt that she seemed to have heard such sentence, then she remembered, that's the conversation she had with Master on that day in the Tradition Academy. She thought, was Master testing her? Yes, otherwise with Master's ability, how would he let the little monster kept humiliating the Tradition Academy? She remembered the words she replied Qin Changsheng. Master, no one dares to humiliate me. Yes, since she was born, no one dared to humiliate her. Then, they also couldn't humiliate her respectful master, couldn't humiliate the Tradition Academy that she gradually cared and loved more and more. Anyone who dared to do so, had to pay a deep price. Luo stood up, made a salute to Qin Changsheng. Then she walked toward the stone platform. The building was entirely silent, countless eyes followed her steps. Until she stood in front of Tian Hai, people then realized what they just saw. The Tradition Academy actually accepted the little monster's challenge. Who is this little girl? Tian Hai looked at the little girl standing in front of him and asked, who are you? Luo didn't say a word, looked at Qin Changsheng sitting under the stage. So you are from that ghost place too? Tian Hai laughed weirdly for a while, then stopped, said with a serious and terrifying tone, don't worry, you are so pretty. How am I willing to kill you? After I get you, then I will kill that kid. Then I will be back and keep getting you, is that okay? This sentence was very obscene, especially when it's spoken from a 12-year-old boy's mouth, it's more obscene. Luo was very angry, but she looked more and more calm. People who were participating the Ivy Festival, all looked at the stage, many professors and officials' eyes fell on the little girl. They confirmed that she already successfully purified, unlike the completely useless trash Qin Changsheng, but they couldn't tell her stage, obviously she couldn't beat Tian Hai. Comparing such a pretty girl to the little monster from the Priest Academy, was originally a very unreasonable thing. People thought that at the next moment they would see an image of little girl falling in a puddle of blood. Many people felt unwilling and pitiful. Zhuan Huanyu suddenly stood up and shouted, stop. He knew that Luo Luo had an uncommon origin, but no matter how uncommon, how could it be stronger than that little monster's background? Also, this little monster's method was too horrifying. The fact that the previous Yao youngster was destroyed was the best evidence. How could he watch her get bullied by this little monster? The bishop from the priest academy slightly frowned, which indicated Tian Haiya heir to stop, but the professor from the heavenly academy appeared on the side of the stone platform, faintly blocking Tian Haiya heir's vision, and then gave Zhuang Huanyu a cold look. The bishop of the Department of Traditional Education was about to say something, suddenly Su Shiji said something, and seemingly unintentionally blocked his view. Tian Haiya heir looked at Luo Luo, laughed brutally. Between his red lips, his teeth were as white as bones from the dead. He wanted to tell her, "You see, how many people wanted you to die, but I wouldn't kill you. I would only destroy you, then go destroy that useless trash." He knew, if he's slower, then he might be prevented by someone, so he stopped hesitating. He flew to Luo Luo's side, struck down his fist. His fist was very small, yet it carried terrifying hurricane and lightning. His mind was very violent. His method was very nasty, but he was truly strong, not to mention he was ruthless. Wind and thunder were supernatural phenomenon formed when Xiao Xingists solidified Qi A to certain point. They at least needed to be in the high meditation stage before they could Xiao Xing their Qi to such terrifying extent to make such effect. As Tian Haiya heir began fighting, he used his entire force. Before, the stalwart and strong Yao boy was destroyed by this fist, much less now in front of him was only a weak little girl. Below the stage there were countless shocked shouts, implicated with surprising screams, many students covered their face and did not dare to look. Among the shocking shouts and surprising screams, suddenly there was an extremely angry, extremely terrifying, also somewhat dazing shout. People looked at the stage, saw that this shout was actually from Tian Haiya heir. In front of Tian Haiya heir's fist, a fist appeared. That's Luo Luo's fist. Her fist also carried hurricane and lightning, but the hurricane was stronger and the lightning was brighter. Ka. La. Instantly, on the surface of Tian Haiya heir's finger appeared an infinitive amount of breaches. Blood bursted out and the wound was so deep that even his bone was visible. Those breaches instantly reached his wrist. His bones immediately broke. Pain. Unbearable pain. Tian Haiya heir's pupil shrunk into a black dot. A panic but weird shout came out between his bloodily red lips. What followed along was blood. What's going on? Why did this seemingly weak little fist actually hide such terrifying power? Tian Haiya heir did not have time to think. His mind was taken over entirely by fear. While he was making weird shouts, he tried his best to move backward. He knew he must go away from this fist, otherwise he definitely would die. He moved quickly, but Luo Luo chased with an even faster speed. Her fist was as berserk as hurricane, as fast as lightning, landed on Tian Haiya heir's fist. From the beginning to the end of the stage, approximately 100 meters of distance, her fist was always hitting on his fist. Terrifying amount of qi, from her fist, constantly landed into Tian Haiya heir's body. Hong. Tian Haiya heir fell on the edge of the stage, his right hand was entirely fragmented. Between the fingers blood was everywhere. His face was as pale as snow. Inside his pupil was full of fear and surprise. He didn't even know what happened, before he lost, completely lost. On the trees at night, suddenly there were chirping of cicadas. This was night in the summer, it's impossible to be quiet. Yet the surrounding of the stone platform was like a snowless winter night, had all been silent. Then as if snow melted. Dee-da, dee-da. Blood dropped down from that little fist, dropped on the ground. The little girl stood in the wind, looked around and spoke up. BVEC she was answering the previous question from Tian Haiya heir, also she was telling a fact to people here. My name is Luo Luo. I am a student of the Tradition Academy. The cicadas' chirpings became even more irritable. The building became quieter. People looked shockingly at the stage, looked at the little girls whose skirt was floating in the wind and felt what they saw was not real. Everyone thought they would see this little girl lying in a bloody puddle, so they covered their faces and turned around and did not want to look. Who would have thought that the one who actually lied down in a bloody puddle was the little monster from the Priest Academy? No one thought they would see such an ending. The Forgotten Tradition Academy, the unknown little girl, gave this world such a big shock. This fight began suddenly, even a bit shameless, but it ended even faster, making people delighted. Luo Luo knew she would win, because she was originally very strong. That night, the assassin from the demon elite was very dangerous, but it didn't represent she was weak among people of her age. No, among people of her age, she was the absolute elite, especially when comparing the amount of chi. Rarely anyone would have more chi than her. Of course, if Tian Haya Air was calmer and chose to compete her in fighting methods, then she probably could not win in such domineering manner, but Tian Haya Air was used to destroy others arbitrarily. How would he know? Her bloodline itself was the most noble and arbitrary bloodline in the world. Everything was over. Luo Luo looked at Tian Haya Air and raised her fist again. She clearly remembered the words this little monster had said when he heavily wounded the Yao youngster before. She clearly remembered the humiliation this little monster gave her master and her. Then, now is the time to return all the humiliations. Stop. Seeing that she was about to continue fighting, many high-status people who were silently spectating suddenly changed their faces. Before, that Yao youngster could be destroyed, could be killed, people from the Tradition Academy could be destroyed, could be killed, but Tian Haya Air couldn't be destroyed, and of course couldn't be killed. Because his last name was Tian Hai. Sounds of breaking air came up, several high-status people including the professor of the Heavenly Academy came on stage. Chapter 45, Vigorous Like Tigers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The professor of the Heavenly Academy and the elite from the Priest Academy stood around the stone platform surrounding Luo Luo. Anyone could easily control her, but the problem was she stood right in front of Tian Haya Air. With only a few inches away from Tian Haya Air, her little fist was tightly held carrying the wind and the thunder. If she punched down, Tian Haya Air would be dead or paralyzed for the rest of his life. The Heavenly Academy professor and the elites from the Priest Academy all remained focused, not taking a single step forward or a step backwards. They maintained the current status quo, hoping to find an opportunity to suppress her. They thought that after some time has passed and her head had cooled down, she would be calmer and exit her fighting mode. A complete silence. No one wanted to break the silence and to stimulate this little girl. No one wanted to see more blood be spilled. But Tian Haya Air himself was not aware of that. He looked at Luo Luo, coughed blood, and with a shaky voice, cried and said, "Please don't kill me, that I beg you. Don't kill me, I am really scared, scared. Ha 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 ha." The pitiful begging with a cry suddenly became a rampant laugh. The boy with a bloody face looked extremely brutal. He resentfully stared at Luo Luo and shouted, "You think I am afraid of you? I am just playing with you. Because you are over. The Tradition Academy is also over. Look at these shameless elders. They are evil inside out. It didn't matter if it was I who destroyed you or like what's happening now, your future is all over. Because one can treat me like that." The Heavenly Academy professor's face became somewhat mad. Luo Luo slightly frowned, raised her fist higher. Bright lights were surrounding her fingers, very pretty, but also very terrifying. Tian Haya Air's emotion suddenly changed. He screamed and kicked his 2 feet randomly in air like a child whose milk was stolen. "What do you want to do? Do you really dare to hit me again? Divine Queen is my aunt. On this continent, who dares to hit me?" The building was deadly silent. Everyone knew what the little monster said was true. Not to mention that in the rumors he is the Pope's apprentice. Just the fact that he had such an aunt, no one dared to offend him. Thinking about the harsh circumstances she would face aftermath, the look people had toward Luo Luo became pitiful and sympathetic. Surrounded by senior elites and threatened by this hatred boy, what would Luo Luo do next? She looked to a corner and looked to the youngster. This action was her subconscious action or habit, you can call it. It's not that she needs Qin Chongsheng's advice, but she thought she should listen to Qin Chongsheng's advice before she acted. Everyone followed her sight to the corner, to Qin Chongsheng. Now Qin Chongsheng has a mixed feeling. He was not surprised. In these days, he taught Luo Luo Xiu Xing in the Tradition Academy. He clearly knew that although the little monster from the Priest Academy was very strong, but there's no way he can defeat Luo Luo. Otherwise he would definitely prevent Luo Luo from walking up the stage, but he didn't know that the little monster was so silly that he dared to compete Luo Luo in the strength of qi. Because of this, he lost in a such deplorable fashion. Because of this kid's actions, Luo Luo had to make a very important choice now. He knew what Luo Luo wanted to choose because a few days ago when a sand went into Luo Luo's eyes, the little girl spent half a day studying for half a day with the sand in her eyes until she finished studying. Eventually she succeeded, and when she succeeded, she happily ran around the lake with a red eye. She knew why Luo Luo was hesitating and why she was looking at him. Because she worried about bringing trouble to him and to the Tradition Academy, and because she was used to asking for his advice before doing anything, she would follow Qin Chongsheng's decisions. Luo Luo was the one who defeated the little monster from the Priest Academy, and Luo Luo was asking for his advice. After Qin Chongsheng confirmed these two things, he knew what decision he should make. He decided to straightforwardly give his advice and choose what Luo Luo originally wanted to choose. This is very good. Qin Chongsheng thought. He should take the responsibility. He stood up, looked at the professor from the Heavenly Academy and the people, who were holding their breaths. He remained silent for a bit and then said, before he said he wants to destroy Tang 36. His voice was somewhat dry and his tone, not so fluent, appeared very clumsy. It was not because of fear, but because he is not used to speaking in front of many people. Today in the Ivy Festival, seeing so many people, to him this was absolutely the first time in his life. Moreover, although he did things with a harsh tone, he was not good at saying harsh words. He thought a bit and though that the reason should be enough, Tang 36 is my friend, so. Luo Luo understood what he meant, but suddenly she realized that she had made a mistake. Previously she shouldn't have had look at master. The action was a habit and was respect, but this also meant giving the right to make a decision and the responsibilities all to master. This was a very big error that she had committed. She looked back, looked at Tian Haya Air lying in front of him. When Qin Chongsheng was saying that sentence, Tang 36 is my friend. Tian Haya Air saw her eyes and read her meaning. His face suddenly became extremely pale and the expressions in his eyes became extremely dazed. He did not understand why, but then he screamed fearfully, "Help me! Quick!" His scream was very loud, hiding Qin Chongsheng's sentence after so. But it couldn't not hide the terrifying wind and lightning. Luo Luo's noble but arbitrary bloodline made her hate cowards the most. Hearing Tian Haya Air's urgent call for help, her eyebrows raised up. Her eyes became extraordinarily bright. A shadow jumped up like a tiger. Her fist fell on Tian Haya Air's chest. Pa! Tian Haya Air's scream instantly stopped. After a while, the silence suddenly broke by countless surprising shouts in the building. Tian Haya Air passed out in a bloody puddle. His ribs were fragmented, vessels completely broken, and his veins were destroyed. Luo Luo took back her fist and wind was blowing around her little body. Who? Who? Black hair flew by her pretty little face, like fine willow branches in wind. It's not fine willow branches but it's trace of grasses. She looked at the surrounding people, with a calm face. Like she was standing in storms in the north, between the wild grasses constantly waiting for a one-shot kill moment. An unspeakable force, naturally formed. The surrounding was completely quiet and people looked shockingly at the stage. That little girl actually destroyed Tian Ji. Did she know who Tian Ji was? Did she know what she was doing? Chen Changxing really wanted to tell the entire world, I was the one who told her to take the action, but at this moment the eyes of the entire world were looking at Luo Luo. No one was looking at him. Such as Zhuang Huanyu, in his eyes was only Luo Luo. He generated infinitive amount of admiration and love. Professor of the Heavenly Academy and several elites of the Priest Academy, quickly flew to Tian Ji and checked his pulse. They confirmed that he's still alive, but all of his vessels were broken. He was already destroyed to the worst possible way. He could no longer show Xing in his entire life. The people from the Priest Academy used the fastest speed to carry Tian Ji downstage. Then sent him to the royal palace, hoping guests or royal doctors in the palace could keep the last hope. If not, they might have to inform the Divine Queen. The bishop and teachers of the Priest Academy left with them. Before they left, they glimpsed at the professor of the Heavenly Academy. What they had meant was clear. You caused this event, from hiding the Priest Academy that you were the one using Tian Ji, then you had to give an explanation for this. The professor of the Heavenly Academy looked at Luo Luo. His face was as cold as ice. His voice was as harsh as an edge of knife, you hit too hard. You little girl, is too cold. Luo Luo thought that when Tian Ji destroyed Xian Yuanpo before, what did this professor of the Heavenly Academy say? She recalled. At that point, the professor of the Heavenly Academy said Tian Ji went too hard. Tian Ji said he only promised not to kill Xian Yuanpo, never said he would not destroy Xian Yuanpo. I never promised you I won't kill him, also I only destroyed him. Luo Luo thought she was very reasonable, turned around and walked down. The professor of the Heavenly Academy was surprised. He remembered his previous conversation with Tian Ji, thinking that Luo Luo was intentionally sneering at him. He felt his anger boiling and swelling up. His face looked extremely ugly and harshly shouted, "How dare you walk away like that?" Luo Luo paused her steps. The professor of the Heavenly Academy looked at her back and said expressionlessly, I don't care about your identity or your true succession of teaching. But you have to remember, here is the capital of Zhou. Here is the Heavenly Academy. You just heavily wounded someone in public, do you think you can run away? On the surface he only made these statements, but everyone knew the real meaning. No matter how mysterious Luo Luo was, the one she heavily wounded was the apprentice of the Pope and the Divine Queen's nephew. In the entire human world, no one could protect her. The professor of the Heavenly Academy looked like he's laughing, little girl, you are truly daring. Luo Luo was somewhat unhappy and asked, what kind of thing are you? How dare you talk to me like that? The entire building was silent. No one could expect that, at this moment, this little girl was not scared at all, but rather so aggressive. Only extremely few people faintly felt something was weird because the influence this little girl revealed, was truly strong. Facing the professor of the Heavenly Academy, she was like a lord facing her vassal. What kind of family or sect, could teach such female student? The professor of the Heavenly Academy felt dazed. Then he felt so angry that he laughed extremely coldly. Now he was very certain, this little girl's identity must be uncommon, but just like what he said before, she destroyed Tian Ji. This meant, in the entire human world, not many could change her fate. After a harsh shout, his right hand casually waved. There was no wind nor rain, only a straight line of qi. The qi that even true iron could not block off. This was star-fusing elite's method. No wonder he's the professor at the Heavenly Academy. It didn't matter how strong Luo Luo was, after all she was only a little girl. People seemed to have heard sounds of death, as if there was someone saying the little girl was dead. Who could change this situation? Someone looked to the seat for the Tradition Academy in the corner, wanted to see that little girl's friend. There was only a seat, wine and dishes. There was no one there. Tian, bingo. I think Chen Chongsheng took the bullet for Luo Luo. I mean, he isn't the type of dickhead to leave, and well. He isn't there and he sees the dickhead about to ambush her, he would def talk it he hit instead of having Luo Luo take it. Well, we will see in the weekends BC, they don't translate till then. Chapter 46, Mao Chiu Yu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When the professor of the Heavenly Academy moved, no one besides Ze Tian Ji and the bishop of the Department of Traditional Education could stop him. Ze Tian Ji, as the general whom the Divine Queen highly trusted, obviously could stop the professor, and the bishop, who had the most reasons to prevent him, looked like he fell asleep. Although Zhuang Huanyu was ranked 10th on the honor roll of Green Cloud, there was still a huge gap between senior elites and him. He did not have the authority to stop the elites. As he watched death approach the young girl, his face became extremely pale, but he couldn't do anything. Luo Luo looked at the Qi aiming at her, sensed the shadow of death. Her thin eyebrows slightly rose up, but her expression was still calm because she knew that no one could kill her in the capital except the extreme situations like the one that night in the Tradition Academy. She was certain that she would not be killed, but others didn't know that, so they were shouting from the surroundings. Suddenly, someone stood in front of her. The person was not tall, but he was taller than her, so he blocked her body. When Luo Luo saw the person's back, she recalled the night when Chen Chongsheng protected her. Once again, she recalled her dad's quote. When the sky falls, there will be someone tall supporting it for you. For a moment, the coldness she felt from the professor from the Heavenly Academy wasn't so cold from the warmth she felt from Chen Chongsheng. The moment Luo Luo's fist landed on Tian Haiya's chest, Chen Chongsheng left the seats because he wasn't sure if Luo Luo's clansmen would appear promptly, even though she had a strong, mysterious background. Because he was Luo Luo's teacher, he had to take responsibility and protect her. He came very promptly. As the professor's qi traveled through the air, Chen Chongsheng had positioned himself between the professor and Luo Luo in time. He held the short sword horizontally and felt a little nervous. He was not sure if his short sword could block the professor's qi, and he didn't consider what would happen if he couldn't block it because that was not something he needed to consider. Fine, he did think about what would happen. Behind his body, his right hand grabbed Luo Luo's hand. The big hand held onto the little hand, and at the center of the palm was a button. The qi that the professor had solidified into a straight line in front of his finger traveled swiftly and fiercely. Chen Chongsheng thought that the next moment he would disappear from the stage. Unexpectedly, he was still at the same place. He looked back at Luo Luo, thinking, what's happening? If you don't activate the button of 1,000 miles, then we would die for real. Of course Chen Chongsheng didn't die, and neither did Luo Luo. She didn't use the button of 1,000 miles because she was certain that no one could kill her in the capital, especially in the Heavenly Academy. This is because in the capital there is someone who knew her identity, and he was the strongest in the Heavenly Academy. A soft wind blew by, and the qi that was solidifying into a straight line, which seemed invincible, was easily waved away like the smoke coming out of countryside hearth. The soft wind originated from 2 sleeves. An old man full of white hair appeared on stage. His sleeves were slightly flowing in the night wind. The entire field was silent. Everyone stood up, including Ze Tian Ji and the bishop of the Department of Traditional Education. The students from the Heavenly Academy, including Zhuang Huanyu, all bowed down. They were all extraordinarily respectful and very surprised. High Principal. Teacher. Yes, this elder was the principal of the Heavenly Academy. 2 sleeves of soft wind Mao Chiu Yu. Immediately, the vice principal Zhuang also appeared after him. Zhuang Huanyu looked at the vice principal Zhuang and his expression was changed. Everyone in the field was dumbfounded. No one had thought that the two strongest principals of Heavenly Academy would appear at the same time, especially the principal Mao Qiu, who was one of the countable elites on the continent. His status was extremely high. Normally, the first night of the Ivy Festival wouldn't require high-status people to appear. The professor's expression changed. He walked to Mao Qiu and greeted politely. Then he explained what happened tonight and described the situation to make it more advantageous for him. From Mao Qiu's protection, the professor realized that what occurred tonight will not go according to his plan, but he didn't want the fire to burn on his own body and instead tried to put down the fire before too late. Destroyed someone for no reason. Ruthless. Bullying the weak one. Hearing the professor's report, people's faces suddenly looked very interesting. Was he talking about Tian Ji or the little girl from the Tradition Academy? Mao Qiu suddenly laughed. The bishop from the Department of Traditional Education also laughed. The professor of Heavenly Academy suddenly felt a bit worried. The bishop laughed as he stood up, walked outside of the building, and said torpidly, "Friend Chao, have some pride." The professor's last name was Chao. He was dazed on stage and felt his torpid sentence was like a whip landed on his own face. The vice president Zhuang expressionlessly suggested that the Ivy Festival tonight has ended. The crowd gradually spread out. When they were leaving, they all subconsciously looked back at the stone platform. Mao Qiu looked at Luo, as if he was going to say something, but after all he did not say a word, and simply smiled. Chen Changsheng made a salute with Luo next to him and then walked down the stage. They returned to the seat at the corner and packed up their stuff. Luo simply followed behind him and appeared to be very well behaved. She thought that previously on stage, did she act too wild, or too arbitrary? Would Master dislike that type of her? She grabbed his sleeve, turned up her little face, and giggled. Chen Changsheng looked at the little girl's cute tiger teeth, smiled, and rubbed her head. As the banquet ended, the building became completely silent. Mao Qiu and Professor Chao faced each other on stage and started a conversation. In order to suppress the Tradition Academy, you allowed the little monster from the Priest Academy to behave crazily in the Ivy Festival. What you did was crazy. True, I just dislike the Tradition Academy. Many people are just like me, am I wrong? Resentment. No, that was an event that happened almost 20 years ago. That everyone knows clearly what you actually want. What do I want? The Pope made you a professor at the Heavenly Academy. You have been a professor for more than a decade. Anyone would be tired of it. That's understandable. Principal, I am always respectful to you. You are the professor at the Heavenly Academy. Just one step up and you will be the bishop of the Department of Traditional Education. Who won't be tempted? Mao Qiu looked at him and spoke calmly, but you did something wrong. First, you shouldn't drag the Tradition Academy in. Second, you shouldn't use people who you don't have the right to use. Lastly, you should find out the identity of your opponent. The professor's face turned extremely sour because the principal spoke the truth. His position was arranged by the Pope. Professor was a position used by the Li Palace to control potential elites from the great schools, but he was a professor for so many years and indeed, he felt tired of it. He wanted to become the bishop of the Department of Traditional Education. Just one step away and he can see a completely different sky. Who can resist such temptation? But obviously he couldn't admit to it and insisted, there are people in the tradition trying to use the Tradition Academy to test out the situation. I want to solve problems for the Pope and the Divine Queen. How am I wrong? Mao Qiu said expressionlessly, does the Pope and the Divine Queen know this? The professor remained silent for a while and said, Tian Ji had become a useless person. The Tradition Academy. How can it still exist? Aftermath. If there is any problem in the Tradition Academy, then Mei Li Sha obviously has to take his responsibility. It's not a bad thing from any perspective. No one is stupid. Even Tian Ji himself knew you were using him. Mao Qiu said, unfortunately, you are stupid. The professor of the Heavenly Academy said unwillingly, who is that girl from the Tradition Academy? Mao Qiu turned around and walked out of the building. That's not important. The key is that the bishop had been taking charge of the Department of Traditional Education for several decades. Even earlier than when the Pope was enthroned. Do you think you can take down such person simply using some conspiracies? The professor looked at the elder's back and said angrily, I only know that the Divine Queen's nephew was destroyed. Someone has to respond to this event. Even if the Pope doesn't get mad, there must be someone taking the anger from the Queen. Mao Qiu didn't turn but continued walking replied, you still don't know who should take the responsibility tonight. The professor was shocked as if he got hit by lightning. He knew that tonight was probably the last night in his life. Luo didn't want to get surrounded by people, so after discussing with Chen Chongsheng, she hid into the trees in the darkness. Familiarly, she led him and found a road, pushed the two heavy doors, bypassed a small building, and went into a street from an unknown back door of the Heavenly Academy. Chen Chongsheng heard she said she had been to the lectures at the Heavenly Academy before and asked curiously, always go through the back door? Luo said, if I don't go through back door, then how can I come to lecture at the Heavenly Academy? Chen Chongsheng had some guesses and asked, the one who was giving you lecture that was the principal of the Heavenly Academy, Mao Qiu? Luo replied yes. Chen Chongsheng said with a mixed feeling, that's truly call back door. Luo said, Principal Mao's level of teaching is much worse than Master's. He was actually compared by Luo to the legendary principal of the Heavenly Academy. This thing was way too bizarre. Don't speak such nonsense. If anyone hears, he will laugh. Chen Chongsheng said with a straight face, but he felt extremely happy. But when he saw the carriage in the street, all of his happiness suddenly disappeared. There was a lantern hanging on the carriage and on the lantern, there was a word, Su. That's the carriage from the Dongyu General's mansion. Chapter 47, The Shadow on the Window and the Green-Orange. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The invitation from the General's mansion was both with manner and indifference. Chen Chongsheng told Luo to stay where she was. He walked towards the carriage parking place on the street. Only when he walked there did he notice that nothing but silence surrounded the carriage. Not a single person was around and the previous guard who invited him was nowhere to be seen. The battle horse in front of the carriage was tall and muscular. Its mane showed hints of crimson in the darkness of night. Surely it was no regular species and was a certain unique beast's descendant. Although the horse was intimidating, Chen Chongsheng didn't glance at it for even a moment because the person he needed to see was the guest sitting inside the carriage. The guest was still sitting in the carriage. There were bright lamps hanging around the carriage and the light shone through the windows and projected the guest's shadow onto the curtain. His image was so clear that it seemed to be carved by knives and swords. Chen Chongsheng bowed towards the shadow on the curtain of the carriage. Its shadow was clear and so was the person inside. The terrifying and serious aura of him was also clear. It wasn't until now did Chen Chongsheng realize where the two pressures he felt previously in the Ivy Festival came from. One of the reasons he attended the Ivy Festival was to see the guest with his own eyes. Although during the entire festival the guest never seemed to lay his eyes on Chen Chongsheng, he actually was observing Chen Chongsheng. It has been a long time since you left Xining and arrived at the capital. Up until now, I haven't heard any rumors that I don't want to hear. This proves that you are a smart person and your choices are steady. I like it. Su Shiji's calm and cold voice was heard behind the curtains. After you joined the Tradition Academy, you learned how to use your background. Now I notice that you are smarter than I imagined. It's hard to say, but I'm starting to like you more and more. Chen Chongsheng knew he was speaking the truth instead of scoffing or being sarcastic. He was not enough for the Yudong general to scoff at, or even be lied to. But he didn't grow happy from his liking because he noticed that he still didn't like Su Shidong's taste. The taste was not bitter, spicy, sour, or sweet. It was an indescribable feeling. The tone that Su Shiji used when talking to him was also a taste. Calm, yet indifferent. It wasn't intentional, but Su Shidong looked down on Qin Chongsheng as an elder. Qin Chongsheng didn't like this. If it weren't for the troubles that grew out of the marriage vow and the abuse he endured from the general's mansion, if Su Shiji actually was treating him with an attitude of an elder, then he wouldn't mind. But the problem was that the previous statements were true. Su Shijia was silent for a while. Perhaps he was surprised with Qin Chongsheng's silence, or maybe he needed some time to think about some stuff. The night breeze blew around the lamps. He asked, "Who is she?" Yes, this was the thing he actually cared about. Of course, this concern didn't originate from the marriage vow that Qin Chongsheng made. He didn't care about any female contact with Qin Chongsheng because he never treated Qin Chongsheng as his future son. Law started from the moment that Luo Luo stepped up to the battle stone of the Ivy Festival. His subordinates in the general's mansion started to research her background. Yet when the Ivy Festival ended and Su Shiji rode the carriage and left the Heavenly Academy, there was still no information found about her background whatsoever. Su Shiji knew the great ability of his subordinates. He was surprised. The young girl was with Qin Chongsheng and therefore, he was also alerted. Qin Chongsheng didn't answer his question because he felt that he didn't need to answer Su Shiji's questions. The shadow on the curtain grew clearer and its outline became sharper. This was perhaps because Su Shiji got closer to the window. The aura also grew more terrifying and the pressure seemed to become a real existence. Qin Chongsheng felt an uneasiness in his chest, as if a mountain was landing on him. Speaking the truth, I regret a little. Su Shiji's emotionless voice was heard from the carriage. When you just came to capital, and no one knew you, I should have just killed you. There is a rule among generals and that is to be merciless. I obviously know, but after all you are connected with Su Mansion, someone wants you to stay alive, so I let you stay alive. Qin Chongsheng looked down but didn't say a word. The capital in the summer, was a place where people can easily die. The flood period is very hard to be certain, but what can be certain is, the rivers in the capital will definitely rise in level. When the river level rises, it will wash away both floating corpses and ashes. Su Shiji spoke through the carriage window coldly. For example, Professor Chow from Heavenly Academy. After tonight, perhaps he will become a floating corpse thousands miles away from the capital, or perhaps he will become food for the kois in the river Luo. All in all, no one will see him again. After hearing this, Qin Chongsheng shockingly raised his head and looked towards the window. He didn't understand why the professor from the Heavenly Academy was going to die. After all, that little monster is one of the family of Tian Hai. No matter how the situation turns out, the professor still acted out on his own accord, and the queen will be unhappy. If the queen gets angry, then Sir Zhou Tong will be very mad. If Sir Zhou Tong is furious, then he will face something worse than death. Therefore, the professor will commit suicide tonight. Sure, I regretted not killing you from the beginning and now it's difficult for me to react. I must remind you though, that there are many ways of surviving that are more terrifying than death in this world. The professor understood this, and I hope you will too. The lamps waved back and forth lightly and the light dimmed a little. Dozens of guards appeared from the darkness and circled around the carriage as it traveled slowly past the street and towards the Dongyu general's mansion. The tall battle horse peeked indifferently at Qin Chongsheng right before it left. Su Shiji was silent in the carriage and gloomy fire was burning in the depths of his pupils. It was not violent but rather cold. He noticed that some stuff was getting out of his control. Because of the letter sent from Mountain Virgin, he never really got to control the situation, but now it got even more strange. He knew clearly why Qin Chongsheng entered the Tradition Academy. He first thought that there was nothing much about this event, but now even if this was true, some people are trying to use this fact to start trouble. The people who were still loyal to the royal Qin family and the tradition seemed to finally obtain a chance to overturn after all these years. How would this situation affect the Dongyu general's mansion? This thing was way too big. Even if he was the most trusted general of the Divine Queen, he dared not step his foot into this pool. The only thing he knew was that if Qin Chongsheng actually got pulled into that pool of dirty water, then no one could know about this marriage vow. At least it should be hidden for a few more days. After these few more days, the southern powers would send a representative group to the capital. The few dozens of students entering the Great Trial from the south are also in this group. Because of this, the next 2 nights of this year's Ivy Festival would be delayed. There was still a while for the Great Trial to come. The Southerners broke the usual tradition and arrived at the capital few months early. This action started some suspicion and debate, but Ze Tian Ji knew clearly that the Divine Queen welcomed the arrival of this representative group. Only a few people in the entire continent knew that the reason for the early arrival of the Southern representative group was that they were preparing to propose on the Valentine's Day. Ze Tian Ji knew this because the Southern representative was about to propose to his daughter. He wouldn't allow anyone or anything to interrupt this marriage. Not Qin Chongsheng, not that mysterious young girl, not anyone. He didn't care about the Tradition Academy, Heavenly Academy, or the old royal family in the darkness in the capital. He didn't care about twists and plots. If anyone tried to interrupt this marriage, then he was not afraid to kill, even if they were people who shouldn't be killed. Since he had a good daughter, then nothing he did would harm him as long as he didn't betray the Divine Queen. Of course, if there were better ways to solve those unpredictable variables, such as Qin Chongsheng and that young girl, then it would be nice. But first, he had to determine some things and ask some people to prepare. To the Orange Garden, he said. The carriage of the Dongyu general's mansion moved slowly on the street and disregarded the strict curfew of the capital and rode towards the royal palace. The Orange Garden is a garden not too far away from the royal palace. Although its acres of land wasn't huge, many orange trees were planted there. To be able to have a garden around the royal palace and plant the expensive orange trees, the owner couldn't be an ordinary person. That is the home of Lady Mou. After returning to the Tradition Academy and standing beneath a tree around the lake, thinking back to the shadow on that carriage window, Qin Chongsheng wasn't in a good mood. He wanted to scream at the river, but he was afraid to disturb the people living in the herb garden on the other side of the wall. He wanted to curse but noticed that his master or senior never taught him how to. He turned around sadly and walked towards the library. On his way through the forest, he saw an orange tree and there were many new-born small fruits hanging on the branches. Instinctively, he plunked one down and ate it. His eyes and eyebrows then proceed to wrinkle due to the sourness of the fruit. Even you are going to bully me. He kicked the orange tree and his breath got heavier. Small oranges fell down like raindrops and a moaning was heard from the back of the tree. Luo rubbed her head and walked out. In her right hand was a lunch box and her left hand covered her mouth. Her face was filled with surprise as if she saw something strange. Qin Chongsheng was a little surprised as well. He asked, "Didn't you go back to sleep?" Luo answered, "Auntie Li prepared some late-night snack and I was going to share with Master." Qin Chongsheng saw her expression and was confused, "Then why are you surprised?" Luo opened her wide eyes and answered sincerely, "I never knew that a character like Master would have such a childish side as well." Qin Chongsheng was a little embarrassed and walked towards the library. A quiet voice was heard from the forest and it was affected by the sourness of the green orange. "I only turn 15 in a few months, so what if I have a childish side?" Chapter 48, On Top of the Tree. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While the stars were twinkling in the night sky, Qin Chongsheng and Luo were sitting on the floor enjoying their late-night snack. It contained a few types of delightful desserts and 2 bowls of herb gruel with a side of salted meat. It delicious, so the master and apprentice enjoyed themselves and didn't speak a word during the meal. After finishing the gruel and dessert, Luo Luo finally took a break and spoke. Thinking back to the carriage she saw near the side door of the Heavenly Academy, she couldn't resist but ask while chewing her salted meat. Master, what kind of relationship do you have with the Dongyu General's mansion? Chen Changxing knew curiosity couldn't be oppressed for a long time and was mentally prepared for her question. He casually answered a few sentences and wanted to switch the topic. His preparation was to fool her and use his status as the master to skip the questioning. It seemed like an easy task. But tonight's view was too beautiful and Luo Luo couldn't resist her curiosity. She knew he didn't want to answer and her black pupils started to move from one side to the other. She tried a few different possibilities, such as the trivial plots of a son of a friend or family feuds. Chen Changxing never knew her imagination was so rich and didn't know how to answer. Therefore he kept his silence. Luo Luo stared at the night sky full of stars above the Tradition Academy and thought. She picked up a small green orange that she previously got from the woods and chewed it. Suddenly, she let out a voice. Chen Changxing thought she was surprised by the sourness of the fruit and shook his head. I told you it was too sour and inedible. Plus it is not good for the stomach. Luo Luo swallowed the green orange and she didn't seem to be bothered by the sourness. She looked at Chen Changxing surprisingly and said, Master, are you vowed to marry to Su Yu Rome when you were an infant? Chen Changxing opened his mouth slightly and didn't know what to say. On the side of respecting her imagination, he couldn't help but to admit to the fact. Ah! Before he made in response, Luo Luo waved her hands and embarrassment filled her face. Silly me, how could I even think of such nonsense? How could it be possible? It's that Su Yu Rome we talking about. Chen Changxing grew even more silent because he didn't know what he should say. His mouth was closed bitterly and thought to himself, this marriage vow was way too ridiculous. Even Luo Luo, who had nothing but utmost respect for him, would think like this too. Why is it impossible between him and Su Yu Rong? Go back to sleep, he thought for a second and told Luo Luo, I have some business to take care of tomorrow, don't come here too early. Luo Luo was nervous and said insecurely, Master, are you angry? Chen Changxing said, did you do anything today that would make me angry? Luo Luo thought hard and found she didn't do anything that would anger her master. Previously on the Ivy Festival her actions are arrogant and not nice as usual, but since her master said he wouldn't blame her, then of course he wouldn't blame her. Never did she realize that a causal word of her had hurt Chen Changxing's self-pride. Since she said it causally, therefore he was hurt deeply. After Luo Luo left, Chen Changxing cleaned out the lunch box on the floor and organized the books back onto the bookshelves and dimmed the light. He walked back to the library and glanced around, then left in the night as if he was saying goodbye. After returning to the small building, he started packing his luggage and collected everything necessary into a box and drew out his short sword from his waist and started to meditate on his bed. He wasn't absorbing the starlight and trying to purify himself. He was waiting for people to show up. Tonight's Ivy Festival Luo Luo handicapped Tian Ji. For sure she started a big trouble. That trouble would target her, target him, and mostly importantly target the Tradition Academy. He doesn't know who would come for vengeance, but he knew that those people would be powerful. He knew that Luo Luo's background is mysterious and extraordinary. Or else the principal of Heavenly Academy, Mao Qiuyu, wouldn't protect her on the Ivy Festival. But the little monster she handicapped is the nephew of the Divine Queen. He was one of the family of Tian Ji, the most terrifying family in the entire continent. From the beginning Chen Changxing thought Luo Luo's background would stop the people to not make trouble on the surface. But after Su Shijie said that the Heavenly Academy professor would commit suicide tonight, he didn't have much hope in Luo Luo's background anymore. Nowadays even the royal Chen family is under the influence of family of Tian Ji. Even the professor of Heavenly Academy would die due to the handicap of Tian Ji. Then what should be expected for him and Luo Luo who directly caused the handicap of him? Plus they around want to ruin the Tradition Academy. He waited for the enemy's arrival and was ready to leave. Although he would miss the Tradition Academy and next year's Great Trail, but as done cannot be undone. Then at least he should leave a complete ending for this event. In his plan, the entire Tradition Academy would turn into an ocean of flame later. He had a plan to escape. Tradition Academy would pay for the handicap of Tian Ji Air, and Luo Luo isn't an ordinary character. For sure the enemy would be satisfied by this ending. This entire night, Chen Changsheng sat alone in the room. Only a old worn-out luggage sat near his feet. He waited silently for another turning point in his life. He waited with a patience unseen of peers his age. No one knew that he waited in the Tradition Academy for an entire night. Even until countless years afterward no one knew. Only himself knew how long this night was and how hard did he struggle to stay and how much effort he put in. Even until the sunlight shined on the school, nothing had happened. This night, many people also paid attention to the Tradition Academy in silence. Those people were just like him. They thought that the ruthless officials of the Department of Investigation would rush into the Tradition Academy at night and bring Chen Changsheng into the terrifying jail of Zhou, or the Xiaxingists of Li Palace would arrive at night and start slaughtering and fire in this place to burn the academy that Divine Queen hated into the ground. But the above didn't happen. The sunlight was just like usual and the gong in the royal palace was struck. Chen Changsheng opened his eyes and walked to the window and glanced at the quiet sight of morning of the capital. He didn't understand, then he realized. Due to his request from last night, Luo Luo didn't enter the Tradition Academy until noon. Of course, she didn't forget to bring the heavy lunchbox. Chen Changsheng asked her to search for some information. Before they finished their lunch, a message arrived from the other side of the wall. Luo Luo lowered her head and listened quietly for a while. No one saw the professor from the Heavenly Academy. She raised her head and looked at Chen Changsheng. The vice principal receive a report. It should be the letter of resignation. Chen Changsheng was silent. Looking at his expression, Luo Luo realized something as well. Disappearing after resignation. No one knew if he returned to his home village or he hid in the wild to Xiaoxing. It was impossible to find out in such a short time either. It wasn't a resignation from his job, it was a leaving from this world. Perhaps in the mansion of the professor an extra white rope was found. In the river Luo perhaps the ashes already sank to the very bottom and mixed with the mud. A big character like him died silently like this. Chen Changsheng felt a breeze around his neck and he peeked at Luo Luo with complicated look. It was a plot to ruin the Tradition Academy. The professor of Heavenly Academy asked the little monster to help him. No matter how the Tradition Academy respond, there will be problems. Because he is the nephew of the Divine Queen. If he won, then the Tradition Academy would be destroyed. If he lost, the Tradition Academy would face the wrath from the palace. But no one expected that the ending of this plot was the professor facing the wrath of the palace and died. The young boy and girl in the Tradition Academy didn't need to be responsible for anything. Why? Because Luo Luo is powerful, because Luo Luo's background is way more powerful. In conclusion, Luo Luo is way too powerful. Chen Changsheng looked at her and sighed, "It seems that you are more amazing than I expected." Luo Luo felt a little embarrassed. "Master, you are the person who's truly amazing." Chen Changsheng scratched his head and said, "Is it really fine for us to compliment each other like this?" Chen Changsheng always thought that if a person lives for a few hundred years, time passes quick and should be valued. If there are only few decades, then he should treat time with even more respect. If there is nothing to do, then one should continue to read and Xiaoxing. Only until dusk did he and Luo Luo put down their books and began to eat their dinner. Afterwards they started to walk around the lake in the Tradition Academy. Walking may seem to waste time, but he didn't mind, because he knew it would benefit his body. The two walked to the other side of the lake and arrived at the bottom of a big tree. Chen Changsheng got childish for once and proposed to climb to the top of it and view some scenes. Luo Luo always listened to him, talk less of a fun thing like this. Of course she accepted the proposal. Moments later, these two climbed to the middle part of the big tree and stood on a thick branch. It was around 10 or more yards away from the ground. They could see into the distant streets, and barely they could see the shape of the Li Palace. Under the setting sun, the view of the capital was nice. They could see the entire 100 Blossom Street out of the Tradition Academy. It was quiet as usual, but he and Luo Luo knew that the 100 Blossom Street was different from before. In the shadow and under the roofs in the streets, countless eyes were staring into the inside of the school. "Master, I'm sorry." Luo Luo said lightly. She believed that it was because of her that Qin Changsheng was pulled into this mess. She also knew that he valued time and the quiet life of Xiuxing. Her apology was true and sincere. "The one that should apologize should be me." Qin Changsheng said, "If I didn't write your name on the list that day, then you wouldn't be a student of the Tradition Academy, then how would you encounter this trouble? Although you are not afraid of these troubles, but troubles are still troubles. Time doesn't bend to the will of a human, or else the time around Qin Changsheng would be unmovable as a giant boulder." A few days later, the second night of the Ivy Festival arrived as expected. Looking at the invitation letter on the floor, he was surprised. No matter the words of Ze Tian Ji that night or the warning from Officer Xin previously, speaking logically this year's Ivy Festival are different from the previous years. Besides, after the first night's bloody battle he thought the second night would be delayed. Luo Luo asked, "Master, are we really not participating?" Qin Changsheng shook his head and said, "We are not going. Ivy Festival is an event created by the academies of the capital, it wouldn't affect them to participate in the great trial next year." The reason Qin Changsheng joined the first night was to understand the rules of the great trial and as well as knowing what kind of person was Ze Tian Ji. Now he has reached both of his goals, why else should he go? Plus in the second night of the Ivy Festival, countless people would pay attention to the Tradition Academy and stare at him and Luo Luo. He's not used to such attention. Luo Luo never thought that he wouldn't go just like he said. She was confused and sad. If we went, perhaps we could actually obtain a high ranking. The rest of Ivy Festival consisted of intellectual exam and arena. They are similar to the great trial in that they would announce the result in ranking. In addition, they wouldn't end so hastily like the first night. If Luo Luo participated in the arena and Qin Changsheng in the intellectual exam, perhaps the Tradition Academy could actually regain a small portion of its former glory. Qin Changsheng said, "It's meaningless." Luo Luo looked at him and said praisingly, "Master is treating fame and glory as dirt. I respect you so much." Qin Changsheng said honestly, "I'm mainly avoiding troubles." Heavenly Academy was probably very lively in the second night of the Ivy Festival. The Tradition Academy was quiet as usual and the 100 Blossom Street finally obtained true peace. The people who watched over the Tradition Academy for days finally left due to the Ivy Festival. After every night's dinner, they would take a walk around the lake. Although the view of the lake and the shadow of the forest are beautiful, but after seeing them many times they grew out of it. After climbing the big tree many times it became meaningless as well. Seeing the amount of disturbing people in the 100 Blossom Street grew short, Luo Luo wanted to capture this precious chance. She used every technique known to little girls and finally dragged Qin Changsheng out of the library. The two walked out of the school door and walked into the 100 Blossom Street and started shopping. Not far away from the 100 Blossom Street was the famous night market. Under the ruling of the Divine Queen the capital prospered greatly. The wealth of the world flown to the capital and the night markets were grand as well. People are walking side by side and the food on the streets attracted the bypassers. Qin Changsheng bought Luo Luo a cotton candy. Luo Luo was surprised and happily accepted it, paying respect to her master and treating him 3 meals a day are things that she's supposed to do. The master buying her a snack is a nature thing for him to do as well. She held the cotton candy and licked it carefully. She worried that if she wasn't careful there would be only a wooden stick left and her master would be scared. Her action was cute. Standing in front of a shop selling baked shellfish, she curiously looked at the shellfishes that were still moving and asked Chen Changsheng if they are edible. Suddenly, she saw a large figure washing dishes in the corner of the shop. Her eyebrows wrinkled. Her action was serious. Of course, still cute. Chapter 49, Stick of Discipline. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That person was well built and his hands were huge. The bowl appeared relatively small in his hands and the image seemed a little silly. His right hand's movement was awkward and he appeared to be handicapped. When he held the side of the bowl, his hand shook slightly, which made people sympathize for him. Luo walked around the shellfish shop towards the back of the person. Confusingly, her face was filled anger. Chen Changsheng walked with her and saw the side of the person's face. He was young. Chen Changsheng finally realized who that person was. The dishwasher who was squatting in the corner washing dishes was the Yao youngster who got severely injured earlier in the Ivy Festival by Tian Ji. His name is Xian Yuanpe. Xian Yuanpe saw a shadow on the wall and turned his head to look. He saw the two and raised his eyebrows confusingly. He noticed that he didn't know the pair and so, he lowered his head and continued to wash the dishes. Even an easy task like dishwashing was now difficult for him. He didn't have the time to care about other people. Leaving the Red River and arriving at the human world despite the harsh journey and struggles. But at the end, you are washing dishes in the streets of the capital. Is this your goal in life? Xian Yuanpo's hand that held the bowl froze. He raised his head to glance at the cute young girl once more. A tsunami was rising in his heart. He thought, who is this girl? How does she know that I originated from the Red River and not from the human world? Looking at his stumped face, Luo got angrier for some reason. Her voice was cold. If your clan saw you right now, would they regret saving money for your journey? Xian Yuanpe may seem tall and well built, but he was only 13 years old. His eyes and traits were still young. Hearing Luo rebuking him harshly, his face got all red and he said angrily, "Who are you? You don't need to care about me." Luo was silent for a while and said, "I am Luo, I am a student of the Tradition Academy." Xian Yuanpe was stumped again. This time, the surprise overwhelmed him. His right hand could no longer hold the oily and slippery bowl. Hearing a crash, the bowl in his hand dropped into the dirty water in the sink. Although it didn't break, water spilled all over. The owner of the shellfish shop yelled, "You useless thing! As tall as you are and you can't even wash dishes." The night market was extremely busy and masses of people walked around the place. The shop's business was well and the owner was concentrated on his cooking. He skillfully flipped the food on the iron plate and didn't have the time to care about anything else. Even when he was yelling, he didn't bother to turn around and look at Xian Yuanpe for even a second. Xian Yuanpe didn't respond. It seemed that he was used to the owner's yelling from his days working at the shellfish shop. He was just staring at Luo who stood in front of him. Surprisingly, his clear eyes became welcoming and full of respect. After he got severely injured by Tian Ji in the Ivy Festival, he was taken back to the Star Seeker Academy by his schoolmates to heal. He didn't see what happened later on in the festival, but he heard his schoolmates retelling the events. He learned that Tian Ji was handicapped by another person. And that person was a little girl. He heard that the girl was named Luo and was a student of the Tradition Academy. Xian Yuanpe always wanted to see the little girl, not only because she avenged for him and he wanted to thank her, but also because the Yao race respects the powerful and he wanted to see what the girl looked like and pay his respect. You are the one. Xian Yuanpe rubbed his big hands on his old clothes. He was a little nervous. Then whatever you call me is fine, it is fine. Luo wanted to reignite the fighting spirit of this boy, but she never thought he would react like this. She was a little helpless. Chen Chongsheng was thinking about another problem and was confused. He asked, "You left the Star Seeker Academy?" He thought that even if this Yao youngster was handicapped by Tian Haiya Air and couldn't even shushing anymore, much less regain his strength, at least he entered the Ivy Festival as a student of the Star Seeker Academy. Would the school expel him just because he was handicapped? This was illogical. Xian Yuanpe didn't know who this human youngster was and knew he misinterpreted from his expression. Xian Yuanpe was a little nervous and quickly waved his two hands while explaining, "The school didn't expel me, but that I got injured like his and can't shushing anymore. I don't want to waste the school's resources while not being able to do anything. Therefore I left." Seeing that Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo did not believe him, he became a little worried. "It's true, the principal and my instructor all advised me to not leave, but I'm a little stubborn. I didn't listen to them and left without notice." You can't blame them. He sure was an innocent kid, Chen Chongsheng and Luo Luo both thought. Whatever the reason for him to leave Star Seeker Academy was or worrying about others misinterpreting the school's action, these all proved that this Yao youngster had a pure soul. Luo Luo relaxed a bit and asked, "Is that so? Then what are you doing in the future?" Xian Yuanpe smiled and said, "I'm trying to save up some money for the trip so I can return home. Since I can't shushing anymore, I rather go home and help my family do some chores. By the way, don't blame the shop owner. Although he likes to yell a lot, he's a nice person. I broke so many bowls and dishes recently but he didn't let me repay him." The owner in front of the iron plate kept on flipping the food and didn't even turn around, but he laughed and yelled something. Looking at the Yao youngster's smile, not see a trace of sadness on his face, Luo Luo didn't know why but she was melancholic. She looked at him and said, "So are you satisfied to return like this?" Xian Yuanpe was silent for a while and said, "Just like what you said before, I came to the capital to shushing. It's not easy for my clan to save up the money and of course I don't want to return like this. But the instructors in the school also said that the body structure of a Yao is different from a human. It's hard to heal up a broken right arm. Then what can I do staying here?" He continued, "My instructor was kind enough to offer me to stay in the Star Seeker Academy and do some chore work. But I may feel worse just looking at my schoolmates progressing day by day while I'm unable to do anything." Luo Luo said, "If you stay in the capital, you may find a way. Why would you leave the Star Seeker in such a hurry?" Xian Yuanpe answered, "The elders in my clan taught us when we were young to never accept any sympathy from anyone, especially from humans." Luo Luo quietly looked at his eyes and felt she that liked him even more, "Follow me." They were two simple words. It wasn't a command but it felt unresistible. It couldn't be denied. Xian Yuanpe felt a little odd, he stumped a little and didn't know how to refuse. After telling the owner of the shop, he followed her onto the streets. When they were about to exit the street and saw the well on the 100 Blossom Street, Luo Luo remembered something and looked at Chen Chongsheng embarrassingly. Chen Chongsheng smiled and didn't say anything. Whenever he did something, Luo Luo never opposed him. Then of course, when Luo Luo wanted to do something, he wouldn't object either. He was never worried if Xian Yuanpe would do anything because he knew Luo Luo's people were always guarding her from afar and protecting her. The Tradition Academy was quiet as usual under the night sky. Due to the second night of the Ivy Festival, there were much less people watching over in the 100 Blossom Street. It helped to relax Chen Chongsheng's mood. He never expected that Xian Yuanpe would be more relaxed than him when it was his first time entering the Tradition Academy. The Yao youngster's hands were on his waist looking around the school. Sometimes, he touches the old broken sculptures and curiosity fills his eyes. Not a trace of nervousness was seen in him. Taking out his keys and unlocking the door of the library, Chen Chongsheng paused and didn't enter. He looked at Luo Luo who wanted to say something but held her tongue. "What's on your mind?" Luo Luo pulled on his sleeves, a little embarrassed. "Master, can you help him, you know?" "He is one of my race," Chen Chongsheng answered. "It's fine if I help him." I'm just curious, why are you so confident that I can heal a wound that even the instructors of the Starseeker Academy think would be impossible to heal? Master is not an ordinary person like those people. Luo Luo widened her eyes and looked at him. From the first day accepting you as my master, you just test my wrist and you know my problem. Then right away, you knew how to solve my problem. Compared to this, healing up his wound would be nothing. The young girl said so confidently as if there is nothing he couldn't do in this world. Looking at her absolute trusting eyes, Chen Chongqing felt an enormous pressure and scratched his head. I'll see first, but I can't promise anything. Luo Luo happily agreed and strode towards the lake. She never believed anything less than promising from Chen Chongqing. Chen Chongqing looked at her back and couldn't help but shake his head. Luo Luo ran to the lake and spoke with Xian Yuanpe, who was testing his strength on the big tree. Xian Yuanpe was surprised and shook his head. It seemed that he couldn't believe what he heard. Then Luo Luo said something else and Xian Yuanpe was even more surprised. If Luo Luo didn't hold him, he might even have knelt before her. Xian Yuanpe was still a little stunned after following her and walked to the library. It was clear that Luo Luo's words brought much surprise to him and Chen Chongqing thought Luo Luo probably revealed her identity to his Yao youngster. He gestured the two to follow him into the library. He lit the oil lamp and sat on the floor. Xian Yuanpe never looked at him and kept on staring at Luo Luo. He was both nervous and excited. Luo Luo never looked at him and said to Chen Chongqing, "Thank you, master." Right now in Xian Yuanpo's mind, Luo Luo was more important than his family. She was more respectable than his clan elders. But she respected a human so much and this human received her respect so casually. He felt it was crazy and was angry because of this. Xian Yuanpe wanted to rip this human into pieces. Chen Chongqing looked at Xian Yuanpo's eyes, which seemed to be ignited in flames. Chen Chongqing was confused. He gestured to Xian Yuanpe to extend his right arm. Xian Yuanpe was confused and spoke unkindly, "What do you want?" Chen Chongqing explained, "Let me see your wound." "You? A human? How old are you?" Xian Yuanpo's suspicion towards Chen Chongqing grew. He thought that Chen Chongqing was a scammer, or how else could he earn so much respect from his princess? He yelled angrily, "Don't think everyone from my tribe is easy to fool, I saw dozens of scammers. Since they needed to bound together and fight against a common enemy, the demon race, the human and Yao are natural allies. In several thousand years, the strength of the alliance was tested countless times and the two sides communicated with each other very often. At least, when a Yao appears in the capital, the residents won't be surprised. But there were still some boundaries between humans and Yao mainly due to their traits and lifestyle. Humans always think Yaos are violent, simple, and beast-like. Yaos always think humans are cunning, fickle, and are no materials for friends. From the point of view of Xian Yuanpe, Chen Chongqing was an ordinary youngster and didn't even reach the purification stage of humans. If he dared to say he could heal the wound that his instructors couldn't, if he's not a scammer, then who is? A loud slap was heard. Luo Luo held the stick of discipline and yelled, "What is that attitude?" The Tradition Academy has its own stick of discipline. It was a straight tree branch that Chen Chongqing made. The most important use of this stick was for Chen Chongqing to mentor Luo Luo's Xiuxing. Now it seems that this stick of discipline was being used in the right way. The stick of discipline is used to teach, to hit. The stick was hard, so it hurts when it is used to hit a person's forehead. Xian Yuanpe covered his forehead and his eyes were teary because it actually hurts. Of course, more importantly he felt grievance. He thought her princess would hit him for a human. "Extend your arm," Chen Chongqing held in his laugh and said. Xian Yuanpe held his head high stubbornly and wouldn't listen to him. Luo Luo raised the stick of discipline in her hand and looked at him, "Extend your arm." Xian Yuanpe lowered his head sadly and extended his arm. Chen Chongsheng stopped smiling and his fingers landed on his wrist. Then he closed his eyes. Even if Luo Luo didn't ask, he would try to heal the wound of his Yao youngster himself. On the first night of Ivy Festival when Tian Haiya Air was arrogantly insulting the Tradition Academy, everyone was silent except this Yao youngster. This youngster laughed out loud. That laugh was a pursuit for fairness. This Yao youngster wanted to pursue fairness of the Tradition Academy, then the Tradition Academy would pay him back. Of course, all of this was built on his confidence to heal the wound of this Yao youngster. Chen Chongsheng's master, Taoist Ji, may be unheard of in the Xiaxingist world. But her skill in medication is one of the best in the continent. Chen Chongsheng's marriage vow with Su Yurong started when Taoist Ji remedied a sickness of the Prime Minister that even the Pope couldn't heal. Chen Chongsheng studied the scrolls of the Way and learned medication when he was young with his master. But most importantly, he was also sick. Although he couldn't treat his own sickness, it doesn't mean that he couldn't treat others' illness. He really wanted to help Xian Yuanpa to get well again. Time slowly passed and the stars in the night sky twinkled above the cloud. Nothing but silence filled the library. Chen Chongsheng opened his eyes once more after a long time.